probably very rarely seen.
Yep.
And even when you're used to it, it's not fun. And so yeah, you but it was just interesting that it was very different depending on where you were. They did talk about there was some thunder snow, which is pretty rare.
I was glad we didn't get none of that. All of ours was snow, but the weird part about it was is it was so high. I haven't seen snow this high in a long time. I mean
How
it.
much you got?
Well, whenever it came all the way down, it went up to about maybe 2.5 foot.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it started going down just today, so it dropped down some. But like we it got so bad that the neighbors was actually walking around and helping uh
Wow.
shovel people's entrance ways to their house and stuff because of it. I
We've
mean,
got some neighbors around here that do stuff like that when it snows.
mm,
Um, Somebody goes who's got a
I'll
snowblower, and
tell you
every so
about
often
me.
he'll just go and do the whole length of the sidewalk,
Yeah,
go in front of
entrance
everybody's
way.
house because we've got an ordinance where you are responsible for clearing the snow from the sidewalk on your in front of your property, and you have to clear it. You have like 24 hours or 48 hours or something like that. So you've got to shovel that out, and everybody has to shovel. But this guy just goes through a ordinance where it's huge. Not all the time, but like last time, like I said, we got like 8 inches of snow, and like yeah, somebody came out and did the sidewalk. That was really cool.
So it looks like we have all the streams up, and I did an audio test, and it sounds pretty good. Got that cat put into the slideshow that you sent me. I've been doing work on UV UV maps,
Huh?
and
Nice.
I have this cool one that you sent where it had the cup with the cat sitting down.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
I used that one as one of my things on there. I stuck it in the slideshow, so it's pretty cool. Been trying to come up with some different uh, concepts and everything with procedural bricks and stuff like that. So I've been messing around with Blender this week while I had the free time.
Nice.
It's kind of weird. I'm not used to all that stuff, so
Well, you dip your toe in and you use your instincts
hmm
and you see what comes out the other end.
it, later on, man, I'll be able to get it to where, like, where they have the little bitty, they have the, like the mural where it has like a face and a whole lot of little objects.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's kind of what I'm working on. Like, there's little squared areas.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. It's like it's a picture made of other little pictures.
Yeah, that's exactly
Like
what it
yeah,
is.
and it can all like relate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do it that way. Um, yeah, I've seen a couple of very interesting things done like that. And they've also got the one where they basically create an image that if you kind of squint a little bit, you see that it actually makes a larger image.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm planning on trying to work on getting set up and going pretty good. So it's gonna be interesting.
You remember those unfocused pictures that were popular for a while?
Yeah,
It
I
was just like a piece of paper with weird dots on it, and they were always like, "Relax your eyes, and you'll suddenly see the image."
yeah. I've been using that one Anunnaki video that
I saw that.
and playing around with it. That's exactly what I was thinking of when I was doing that. I've been using that for like a test on a video thing that they've been doing that's kind of like the whole mural thing, but it's with
Uh-huh.
video.
Uh-huh.
And every time I was looking at that, I was thinking the same thing. It's where you focus hard enough and you can see something. I was like, that's crazy.
That's pretty cool.
So,
Um,
but yeah.
uh, so it sounds like you've got all the streams streaming, even as we speak, right?
Right.
You
All
know,
we got to do
people
it.
are
All we got
listening and no naughty words.
no naughty words, and just whenever you're ready to start recording, let me know. I'll do the countdown and get you started. So,
All right, let's count down. We'll jump into the deep end
okay, so
if you're ready.
I am ready. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, passengers here on our flight. I hope you're enjoying our rather bumpy takeoff, but still kind of fun. This is your pilot, Otto Excelsior. I'm here with my co-pilot, Electronics Warfare Officer, Roger Hansen. And you heard a little bit of cockpit chatter, but we have reached our cruising altitude and speed. We're at 23,000 feet, and I'm going to turn off the seatbelt light and turn on the smoking lamp. So smoke them if you got them. And I am now going to set automatic pilot. So we're going to be cruising towards Shambhala International Airport at an undisclosed location high in the Himalayas or possibly the Himalayas. And in the meantime, we're going to fill the intervening moments with hopefully some enlightening chatter, discussion, and so forth and so on. How are you doing tonight, Roger?
Well, I'm doing a lot better than I was yesterday. I'll put it to you that way. So that's all I can say with this cold weather and the snow and stuff. It's been pretty interesting week.
Well, you were saying it's gone so far as to the pipe freezing stage, which is the most hateful of all parts of winter, in my experience.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We've had an interesting week. It got so bad from the first night that the freeze came through until, well, today we've been using hair dryer trying to keep our pipes from freezing up here at the house. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's the classic. You know, that's so classic. The minute you said hair dryer, I'm like, yep, that's like ever since they've invented hair dryers, people have been using them for plumbing applications.
Yeah, most definitely.
Seriously, some guy thought of that. You know, they have that. You've probably seen that Red Green show, which is
Hmm.
where I think he started like the whole duct tape thing. The handyman's best friend is duct tape. But I mean, they used to make he'd make fun of guys like doing these kind of cob job tools. But somebody thought, hey, this is for hair. I can use this to heat up a pipe. You know, and so hey, can't do that, Ralph. Now everybody does it. You know, and so there's some nut somewhere. It's like, oh, come on, you can't do that. It's for hair. Like, oh, no, I can do this for anything. Um,
I I can
so
I can almost bet that it was a woman's idea to come up with the hair dryer thing though, because like
it
I-
could have been. It
it
could have been.
it dawns on me like this had to have been a woman's idea.
Maybe. You know, I don't know. I'm thinking of my youth, which was like in the late 60s, early 70s, as you know, that's the earliest I really remember clearly as a kid. And men were using hair dryers a lot back then. So I associated it with male
Yeah.
grooming as female. In fact, you know, men were seemed a little more worried. That was a time of exaggerated male grooming,
Yep.
I think. It was that whole trying to reflect like when they say, well, in the animal kingdom, you know, like male birds have the brighter plumage. The male lion has the big mane, the attraction. So why not make the male human more ornate? And it gets back to what I've often said. It's really weird how we look to the animal kingdom or more primitive versions of ourselves to try to figure out what to do with our lives. I'm not a lion or a woodpecker or you know one of these birds or anything like that. So why would I want? I dig dressing up and stuff. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, people should be allowed to groom and dress however they like. And I like to dress colorfully too sometimes. You know, we all like to dress up, but it's just always odd that I, people. You know, you're going to do what you're going to do anyway. But you know, you don't have to like give the excuse of it's like, well, this animal does it. You know, wolves do it, or bonobo monkeys do it, so I should be able to do it. It's like I don't think that's a good excuse, really. I don't know why. Uh,
Well, I should have known better because I keep forgetting I grew up on the Partridge Family. You know what I mean? It's like
there
I
you go. Yep.
I should have known that was actually because it's true. Hair
Mm.
hair dryers was a part of everybody's life, I guess, back then.
Yeah, the hair was it was weird. it was sort of like, back in the 50s, of course, it was, people wore very short hair for the most part. You had people that, grooming got really standardized because of World War II. A whole generation went into the army and got the same haircut, and then they came out again. And I think that kind of created a certain uniformity in our culture that wasn't there before. I often feel World War II like really, really ruined a lot in this country. I blame Hitler personally, but it's just we should never have had World War II. I would have been much happier if that had never happened because there were so many negative changes in our world came about through it. I think
Yeah.
atomic bombs. I mean, the more you think about it, it's like that really stuck. And I talk to people that lived through it, and when you get everything else, take all the different things. I talked to people on both sides of the war, relatives and relatives of friends, and they all said the same thing, that it was an extremely unpleasant time and they would never want to go through it again, and they really didn't want to talk about it. And so, yeah, it seems like it just uniformly the feeling is that this thing really sucked, and really, I'm really sorry for anyone that had to have gone through it. It must have really been really nasty.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I mean, most of the people I've ever talked to, and if you even look at the old documentaries, people didn't really jump for joy when they started talking about the Cold War. You know what I mean? It wasn't really an exciting time in their minds.
Mm.
Well, maybe not. Maybe it was exciting, but not in a positive way.
Well, maybe we can talk about war tonight because we should talk about some Buddhism if we're going to make this a Buddhist thing.
Oh yeah,
And
that'd be
it makes
good.
me think of that question: war. What's it good for? Absolutely nothing, right?
Right.
Um, there's a very famous person called Ashoka, who was an emperor in India, very powerful guy. And at one point or another, he converted to Buddhism. And so you've got a Buddhist ruler, Buddhist emperor. Um, that must have been an interesting thing. And I think about him once in a while. I'm no expert on Ashoka, but he had an army, obviously, probably several armies and a navy, and he had police and jails. People, he executed people, he waged war. Um, and at the same time, he decided that he wanted to belong to a religion, the first rule of which is that you're not supposed to kill people. I mean, that's rule one: don't kill people. It's a pretty good rule, I think. I mean, so, and as we know, there are many countries that are Buddhist. Well, not that many actually, but there are several countries that are Buddhist and several million people that are Buddhist. Many of whom pursue careers in, as soldiers or policemen. Many of them are heads of state or part of the state apparatus, which involves use of violence. Um, and you gotta wonder, how is it that you, justify that to yourself? And and then I started thinking about all the Christians who also are told not to kill people, and in fact to love your enemies, and indeed to sell all that they have and give it to the poor, and just go out because they'll be fine. Consider the lilies. Not a lot of people are ready to be Saint Francis of Assisi, you
Hmm.
know. So, and there's a lot of Christians that engage in things that are, the seven deadly sins. Gluttony and greed are very popular in our culture. Uh, most internet and all advertising is based on that, and most of the economy is too. So it's very interesting how you have this disconnect between what you would like to be, what you think everyone should be doing, but what you're going to do. Because of course you've got your reasons and you've kind of got to, and it's going to get done anyway. And I live in the world, and you know what? If you want holiness, go to the monastery, as any Catholic or Buddhist could say. I'm not a holy guy. I got to do what I got to do. And one thing that stands out to me is that governments don't wage war; people wage war. You know, there's not an entity called the government which pulls a trigger and fires a gun. That's a human being, and in a war, quite possibly shooting at another human being. Although you'd be surprised the number of soldiers that actually deliberately try to miss. I think that's very interesting. I might have talked about this before, but they did some studies, and I think it was like a very surprising. This was like back in the when they were first like studying what rates of fire and stuff. They found that um, it was only like 11%. I could have this wrong, and I should look it up, but 11 or 14% of the soldiers actually were trying to kill the enemy. The rest were like either this was like aiming away or not firing or firing without loading ball. This is for like uh, muzzle loading guns. And most military training after that, like for World War II, they were facing the same issues. So they were like training people to like just shoot without thinking, because if you think about it, you don't really want to hurt somebody else. And I think about poor Ashoka, who he really didn't want to hurt people, but he's kind of in the empire business. So then there's a question of if, for example, you execute a murderer so that he won't murder again, or you send your police after an outlaw who's been killing people and he's killed while you're trying to capture him. You've kept other people from dying, right? Arguably. So, or like you've killed warriors that are trying to invade your territory, knowing that they will come and they will burn villages and, kill and outrage people and do all this stuff. So even though you're killing these guys, arguably guys in armor who said, yeah, I'm going to go to war and try to kill people, and I might get killed too. So they know they're going into a dangerous thing. If you kill these guys, isn't there a good part about that? Not a nice thing, but I mean, isn't that good though? I mean, you're saving like women and children and stuff like that. And I asked a Buddhist about this once, a much more learned Buddhist than I, and he said, no, it does not change the karma. You still killed. And I said, well, isn't there like a kind of meta karma? I mean, isn't there, kind of, well, yeah, he took the bad karma points. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Are there good karma points for taking bad karma points? Kind of deal. But apparently it doesn't work like that. But what I do understand about it is, and again, my understanding is quite likely to be flawed, and I'm sure there are people that would disagree with me. They're more than welcome to in the comment section. All karma is mixed. All karma is mixed. And actually, I had a discussion about this once, and this is where this came to me. He's very interested in Buddhism, guy I know, but he's also a hunter. He goes out every season. They're in a hunting season, and he goes out and he tries to kill deer. And then he eats them, uses it to feed his friends and his family. And he said, I like Buddhism and I'm okay with not killing people, but I go out and I hunt every fall. I'd like to hunt. And I said, well, like I'm saying to you, karma's mixed. And there is the karma of taking the life of a living being, although a deer isn't as bad as a human, but still, you're not supposed to take life. And that's there. Karma means, you're not going to be punished for that. It has nothing to do with punishment. People, I've heard that from people. It's like, no, it's cause and effect. It's like dropping a hammer. If your toe happens to be underneath where you let go of the hammer, it's going to get hit. It's not, you don't deserve to get hit by the hammer. There's not like the hammer isn't angry at you and is aiming for your toe. The hand isn't in a conspiracy. It's simply cause and effect. And if you take life, that sets up resonances that are going to resolve themselves later on, one way or another. But also, if you feed people, that's also going to be resonance in a positive way. So the karma for something like that is mixed, I would say. That yes, there is the negative karma of taking a life, but there's the positive karma of saving other lives. Either through feeding them or arguably by stopping enemy soldiers or highwaymen or criminals from committing outrages and stuff like that. I'm not sure how orthodox that is, but I do know that as householders, we need to be able to make some sorrow skillfully. And we also have to be very careful of not trying to find excuses or saying, oh, well, Buddhist bandits will use Buddhism as an excuse. When they rob people, they say, well, we're just helping them to be generous, which is a Buddhist virtue. So like we're helping them along in their Buddhist virtue. So we're like Dharma helpers, and we'll actually get good company. No, 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 that's not how it works. And I think they're hopefully tongue in cheek about that. But it does mean that we do have flexibility as long as we try to be as mindful of what we're doing as possible and honest with ourselves about our reasoning behind it. You know, I think that if you're going out to hunt to feed people, that's one thing. You just like to go out and like shoot animals and say, well, you know, like, this comment ain't so bad. Like, no, 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 no. But if you want to take the comma hit, and I like to think there is kind of a meta comma about that, but I think it all works out one way or the other in the end. So, um, yeah, and we're living in a samsaric world. We're householders, and we have to make decisions that are compromises. You know, we can't all be um, monks and nuns, obviously, or we would be. But we have bills to pay. We have people dependent upon us, um, and yeah, we have expectations to fulfill, and we have an orderly society to help support through our goodness and through our virtue and generosity. So that's my little talk for tonight, I think.
Pretty good stuff, man. I was like, when you were talking about that, it was weird because here lately I've been thinking about something that kind of relates to this, and it has to do with actually the religion or Christian religion too. But um, a while back, I remember hearing about the what was it well, oh God, the Bodhi tree, I think it is the Bodhi tree.
With the Bodhi tree, yeah, that's the tree the Buddha sat underneath and attained enlightenment.
Hmm. And it was like it reminded me of back when the Catholics were going off to the holy wars. You know what I mean? And I know that sounds weird, but like what you were talking about, they would justify to the Christians that it was okay to kill people in battle because they would be exonerated from going to hell for killing. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and then they the whole purgatory thing happened where instead of going into heaven because they had committed murder during the wars, they would they would go into purgatory for waiting, and then they had to be prayed into heaven, I believe is how the story went.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting how that shows people's reactions to the Crusades. And you know, I'm not an expert on this, but as I understand, the first Crusade that was preached was a completely new idea in the religion
Hmm.
because you know, and think about like what you were just saying. These guys had to be reassured that it was okay to kill in Christ's name, and these guys are the professional soldiers of Europe. These guys have been fighting each other in their little feudal wars ever since the Roman Empire fell. So these are hard-bitten, really tough warriors. These guys
Hmm.
aren't afraid to kill, um, but they're worried about this. And all through medieval Europe, the church had always acted to moderate violence. In the medieval world, there were these special truces that the church was able to put through so that there would be no fighting or warfare on Sundays. And then there would be no fighting and warfare on certain feast days. The idea was to limit war as much as you could. Then they passed special ordinances against attacking sick women or children. Should be non-combatants. The whole idea of non-combatant status. And this had been the church had been trying to modify violence. They were trying to discourage the melees, the tournaments where they just let the young kids go in there with blunted swords, and you usually have a couple of fatalities, broken legs, but it was all good fun, and they were all usually drunk when they did it. But so yeah, the church was, and then all of a sudden the Pope comes out and says, "Kill, kill, kill." Well, you know, not in so many words, but and I'm saying that, like you're saying, yeah, you get time off in purgatory, you get all these indulgences. But the act of warfare itself was, I don't know that you could say it was actually raised to the level of a sacrament, but it was like a holy undertaking. And those who perished in its undertaking if they perished while trying to do this would gain remission of sins and all the trimming. Very similar to what the Muslims were preaching at the time. So he may have taken a page from that. That was always something that was a very, very powerful element in Islam's military expansion, and I think very deliberate. So, yeah, these guys, the most hard-bitten warriors in Europe and some of the toughest guys on earth, arguably at the time, they're worried about, we're worried about killing people, Father. Are you sure this is a good idea? Just goes to show that even though they're doing these things in day-to-day life, deep down they know it's wrong to do to take life, and they really don't want to. And there's a part of them that thinks, one day they'll be able to stop this, and, you know, or at least it's like an ideal. And that gets right back to people today who might be very, very honest church-going people that want to really, they love the idea of living this holy life, but they're still going to descend into the world and then engage in the trade and the what's the thing about touching pitch and being defiled. Once we descend into the world of the hurly-burly normie kind of existence, you can't help but have to play the game kind of deal, and that means compromising stuff. So yeah, that is an interesting parallel.
Yeah, it seemed, I don't know why it stuck in my head when I was thinking about that, but that was one thing that really stuck to me, and it was like I can't remember how long ago it was, or I can't remember when it was when I heard about the Bodhi tree, but didn't that have to do with like one of the first it was actually the creation story when it comes to the Buddhism, wasn't it?
Well, there's a lot of Buddhist stories that are mythological, and they're usually like the Mahayana, um, cosmic space bodhisattva thingies. Um, I mean, even in the Pali Canon, they talk about the Buddha being like umpteen feet tall and all these colors coming out of him and stuff. And we know this is not meant to be taken literally. Because I mean, there's records where somebody wants to go talk to the Buddha, and the Buddha's there with a bunch of monks, and he comes and says, "Which one's the Buddha?" Because they all look like they're all monks. They're all these shaven-headed guys in these ochre robes, right? So it's like nobody ever says he's the 57-foot tall guy over there that's glowing with rainbow colors. Yeah, he would notice anyway. So I don't think that you necessarily take everything literally. That being said, the idea of the world tree is central to a lot of Indo-Aryan mythologies, and indeed, tree motifs I would argue, could be found in any culture of any background, any continent. But trees are obviously very important. But in the Buddha's tradition, he was um, a warrior class person from the um, Himalayan mountains. These persons were part of obviously Indo, right? Indo-Aryan, or as I like to say now, Indo-European cultural continuum. The Buddha did have blue eyes, which is something to remember. So, every culture makes the Buddha look like them. And what's interesting is early Buddhism didn't even have any statues of the Buddha. That was never done. So we don't really know what the Buddha looked like, I don't think. We have a couple of descriptions, but he was always shown as like an empty chair or a footprint, or sometimes like a little parasol
Mm-hmm.
that would have been held over him to keep the sun off. Um, so they didn't actually start making pictures of the Buddha until the Greeks started converting to Buddhism, and Greeks love statues. So the first Buddha statues looked like the god Apollo, basically. So, but then the Asians were like, hey, we like statues too. This is great. And so I think no matter what country you go to, you see a Buddha that kind of looks like the people there, which is fine, which is fine. But I prefer footprints myself. I think that's cooler. Um, but I see now I lost track of what we were talking about.
Oh, it was fun. It was like the whole boot
The Bodhi tree,
the
the Bodhi
Bodhi
tree,
tree,
right?
yeah.
So anyway, with the Bodhi tree, the straight story is that the Buddha, after like he started off a party animal boy, and then he's like, this sucks. And then he went off and he's like these yogis and these ascetics, forest guys, and like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. and he starves himself and like, sits in the sun and all. So this ain't working. So he takes the middle path and he sits under the Bodhi tree to meditate. And it was while he was sitting there that he broke through, that he attained to his awakening. And so the Bodhi tree has been a symbol of that and has been a very important symbol and indeed sacred to Buddhists. And of course, the Bodhi tree can also be the axis mundi, the axle of the world tree, which is very important again in this mythology, stretching all the way from the ancient Norse had this idea. We find the idea of this in Christianity, where the Christian cross that on which Christ is crucified is sometimes compared to a tree, and the tree in the Garden of Eden, so that Christ is in a sense the second Adam who atones for the sin of the first Adam. Um, these are mysteries of original sin that I don't pretend to understand personally, but it's a very very important symbol. And I've always said, I mean, if you just look at a tree, half of it is up above, reaching up to the sun, and that's that unseen half, the roots that go down in just the same way, spreading out in the same direction underneath. So it's a very potent liminal emblem. Liminal is a big word nowadays.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is very much a portal, very much a connector between two worlds, the upper and the lower. And we love border lands. We love borderline conditions. What do we think is the most beautiful? A meadow and woods nearby, or a stream where you've got land and water. And Herman Melville talked about that. Take a path and what was it? Take a path and 2 to 1, it'll lead you to water, or something like that. We are drawn irresistibly
Yeah.
to beaches and waterfronts and stuff. I bet you go to the beach sometimes, or have.
Yeah, when I was living in California, I think the most amazing thing about the ocean is when you're standing out staring out into the ocean. Like that is just an overwhelming sensation because you realize just how huge it is, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't think you can ever feel anything as intense as that feeling if you really grasp what you're looking at. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's overpowering. It's very very powerful. It's frightening and yet fascinating
Yeah.
at the same time.
Ex-
I've spent some time working on the water, and I don't anymore. It's too big, too serious, and anything that happens tends to be extremely permanent. And you avoid a lot of that stuff on dry land. Dry land has its own issues, but it's like the old joke when you're out at sea and things are rough and you can't see anything much, and you ask somebody, "Where's the nearest land?" Oh, not far, about a mile, straight down. And
yeah.
you're like, "I don't like this job that much. I
Yeah.
think I gotta do something else." Um, no, I like to go to the beach sometimes, and I'll get in my bare feet, and I'll just go right up to the water, and I just let the water touch my toes. I said, "There you go, you have a taste."
Oh
But
yeah.
I'm not, just make that contact with this vast thing. Although I'm always interested in those little ships you can see out there sometimes.
Yep.
Wait, yeah, I always think, oh, I should have brought field glasses so I can see what that is.
I think the biggest realization I had was whenever I was in California and I was looking out. I went to Long Beach, and I was staring out at the Queen Mary, I believe is the ship they got out there,
Oh,
and then I looked out past that just and I could see like there was no end. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
it was like, my goodness, that just goes on forever and ever and ever, and it gets deeper and it gets deeper and deeper. I was like, wow.
It gives you that reference point when you can see what you know is this gigantic ship.
Yeah, yeah. It's just horrible, man. So
Um,
it really was. It was a big eye opener, and like even with the water, like
think of going to sea in a little wooden boat.
Oh no,
Who wouldn't have?
uh-uh, not me.
What,
Because
what was what was Columbus's ship was like 50 foot long or something, 80 foot long, was tiny. A little bit. You're like, oh no. Uh,
I realized the first time I noticed that, I realized that I would make it maybe about halfway out past the pier. You know, it was,
right.
and I would come back. There's no way I would go any farther than that because the first time it really dawned on me big time was at the Santa Monica Pier. You know, because you have the wheel and everything. You got everybody going out there and having a good
Yep.
time and stuff.
Right.
But then whenever you look out past that, there's nothing. You know what I mean? It's like, oh no,
Uh,
I couldn't even go out there to fish.
wow.
You
Moves
know.
to eternity. Yeah. Who knows what you might pull up?
Hmm.
You're fishing in eternity.
Yeah.
You're fishing in infinity. Yeah.
When you were talking about the trees though,
Uh huh.
now am I wrong about this? Because I might be. I'm not quite sure, but wasn't Buddha himself born under a tree?
Uh, I, it could be. There's a lot of traditions that I'm completely unaware of. I mean, according to one story, he popped out of his mom's side without causing her any pain. Took 7 little steps. Every step a lotus blossom popped up from under his foot. He pointed at the sky. He pointed at the earth. He said, "Above and below, there's no one as wonderful as me," or something like that. Were his first words. Now, again, I don't think that that's to be taken literally. I don't really think.
It
And
sounds
so
cool.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a story of him being born out of a underneath a tree. I think there was an elephant involved too. The Indians were weird people. This bird, I forget. You know, if Panibasa were here, he knows the whole kit and caboodle. But I tend to concentrate more on the the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of like meditation and breathing and ethical training and stuff like that. Um, Although the stories, some of the stories are really cool, but I think that they have to be understood as symbolic
Yeah.
of, and and that is a normal way to write religious texts in the East and here in the West for that matter too. One of the problems is when people try to literalize them when they were never really even meant to be literal. You know,
Hmm.
that's why we speak in parables, metaphors, and mysteries. You get more information that way.
One thing I find a little bit hard for people. Well, it's not hard. I find it as an actual problem is especially with the religious texts. Like you'll hear a lot of, especially people who go to college and universities to become like pastors and religious leaders. You know, they
Right.
uh, they believe that like they're supposed to relate these texts to today's world and like no, that's not what you're supposed to do. Like they literally meant every word they wrote in those books, you know. Um, so like there's some things that you have to take as literally what they meant during that time period. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, yeah, and also be aware of the language, not just the, whether it's like Latin or Greek or Aramaic or whatever, but also like the kind of jargon they were speaking. I mean, the Book of Revelation is very interesting, and if you look at the Book of Revelation, to my mind, and other scholars have pointed this out, the whole thing, or at least a lot of it, has to do with what they call astrotheology. It has to do with astronomical movements in the sky, different constellations, which they thought were related to world events. Astrology, as they called it now, but I mean, it was their astronomy. They were staring at the heavens and trying to figure out what was going to go on here on Earth because of that. To them, this was like nuclear physics. And this whole idea is like we've noted these patterns of movement up in the sky. Oh wait, there's patterns down here on Earth. When that star rises, the Nile always floods. My God, there's a connection. When the sun does this, we grow crops. Oh my God, there's a connection. If we can just figure out what each star means, we can like know everything that's going on here on Earth, including the future. And that was really why the best minds in the world for the longest time studied the sky very closely and tried to understand what the stars meant. Of course, we don't have that view anymore. And, sometimes I think, man, if you could have taken those brains and had them working on things like astrophysics or quantum physics or chemistry,
Mhm.
or engineering, but they didn't have that. All they had were like star measurements and trying to figure out like I know that like in some cultures they would keep a list of like if something happened in the sky, they would say, well, what happened that day or that year? And they would compare it like over centuries, and they would keep these records. Say, all right, when this happened the last time, the king broke his leg, so this is happening again. Guard the king's leg. Um, they actually had almost a scientific approach to it, but today we would regard it as balderdash, and probably was.
I don't know. I actually, from what I'm seeing with the stuff I've been learning about, especially Buddhism, they were very, very close to a lot of like well, you know how we talk about quantum physics and stuff like that with Mike and them. Buddhism was very, very intense when it came to stuff like that. I'm really starting to realize that they really had a good grasp at a lot of physics, everything that.
Well,
Oh,
I have noticed there's a guy on YouTube that I would suggest anyone listening check him out, Ajahn Punadamo. That's two N's and two M's, I believe. Ajahn Punadamo on YouTube, and he is very conversant in Buddhist mythology. He's actually written a very good book on the subject, which you can download for free from his website. And he has noted that some Buddhist ideas seem to be echoed in quantum physics. I know one thing that struck me was in the Buddhist creation story, or in a sense, what happened was the way we got life down here in the lower realms. 'Cause we're here in the physical lower realms, and there are these higher beings, and they came down here and they saw this kind of foamy substance forming on the surface of this new physical world, and they go, that looks interesting, and they go to taste it, and they partake of it, and so it becomes part of them, and so they become part of the physical world because suddenly they feel they had an appetite, but suddenly they feel hunger, and these are physical sensations that they didn't have before, something like that. But my first thought was quantum foam, the so-called quantum foam, which is the interface between the micro and macro, as I understand it. So it's almost like talking about how consciousness is informed by the physical. The physical is consumed by the consciousness, which gives it form,
hmm
uh, which is my probably very, very incorrect understanding of quantum physics. That you need to have consciousness, and this consciousness is central to Buddhism as well. Um, I think that the quantum physicists are saying that without consciousness, you cannot have matter, you cannot have events. And they're not talking about you and me here talking about Buddhism. They're talking about the consciousness that even a paramecium has, just that awareness, that basic awareness that all living beings share. There is that common denominator in all of us, and just this awareness that we have is what creates not really creates the universe, but is as integral a part of the universe as the matter that makes it up. The two are inexorably intertwined. Um, and of course, that has all kinds of interesting implications that we're still trying to figure out.
I know that with me, like when I started doing a lot of research into consciousness and parapsychology, I mean, you've known me long enough to know that I've never been much of a believer in much of that, you know. I mean, um, but the thing of it is it's like the more you start doing the research into consciousness and even into parapsychology, believe it or not, which does like tie in a lot to consciousness. You start seeing that there is actually a connection there, and then it also goes right into the religious and the spiritual aspects as well as the scientific. It's just, and it's really weird because like these people are connecting things directly to the brain.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the way the brain functions biologically. And that's what really blows me out of the water because like the thing that I've noticed just from going over some of the stuff Mike has with physics is they they want to do their research purely off of mathematics and by doing mathematical equations of black holes. And
Right.
and the reason why they do that is because they want something that's universal and it's not biological. Now, if it's biological, like the human brain, which I've mentioned, like the gray matter within the human brain would be probably the most perfect thing to do these kind of studies on. But they don't use that because it's biological, and everything that's biological to these people is what they call a local.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so they wanna use
They want to work with a non-local.
right. And well, that's if you believe that the consciousness is local. You know what I mean? Now there are people who are starting to say, look, maybe consciousness isn't local.
Right.
And I've noticed
That's
that.
been the idea for a lot of people for many centuries, for many thousands of years, is that our consciousness is not restricted to our bodies.
Hmm.
And they go back and forth on it. It's almost like there's a fashion in these things. And I think, though, that despite it being heralded again and again, I don't think they've actually ever found where quote unquote memories are quote unquote um, stored in the brain. Um, I know that every so often they say, aha, memories are built here, but wait, there's activity over there as well. And then they finally came up with this idea that memories are stored all over the brain.
Hmm.
And I think it has more to do with what we observe happening when we are remembering, when memories are being stored. Um, and it gets back to that consciousness is non-local. I think I talked before about this interesting article I read by a physician, and he said that science has got us to a point where we have to start talking about a soul because for centuries science has been like, we don't need the hypothesis of a soul, we're just working with the body, and that just becomes, well, there is no soul, we've never found a soul in all of our dissections, and da 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 da. um and everything is a function of brain, and mind is an epiphenomenon of brain. I love having a chance to use the word epiphenomenon, by the way. I'm going to use it again. Yep. Mind is nothing more than an epiphenomenon of the brain, and I might even say epicycle later, but we'll see. So anyway, he says more and more things are coming out that are actually tending to demonstrate that consciousness is not local, that your mind is not stuck in your brain. And he talked about things like consistent past life regressions. Um, I would point out personally the evidence that we have these tubules in our brains that actually connect to the quantum world itself. But he talked about especially this thing that happens very often with people with senile dementia and Alzheimer's and people that actually have deterioration of the brain tissue. And he said that very often, and he said doctors have observed this ever since they recognized dementia as a thing, but they never really paid much attention to it. They just figured, well, it's just something that happens. And they never really correlated their data. You will see it very often written in records, but nobody ever studied it. Nobody cared about it. They just didn't attract any notice. But one thing they've figured out is, as people are dying and they're in their the last senescence, and they say very often, and sometimes it's just like days or even hours before they finally die, they come back
Hmm.
and suddenly they're clear. They have perfect memory of everything. Their IQs are back up to normal. They're coherent. They can talk to people. They're completely together. And he says, they used to say, well, he just kind of came back a little bit. But he says, when you think about it, according to modern theories of the brain, a lot of these people don't have a brain. They don't even have a brain. I mean, it's all been rotted away or this or that. And he says it's like saying that somebody without a heart could pump blood or somebody without lungs could breathe. These guys basically don't have a functioning brain. If you just have like 3 or 4 little alveoli left, there's no way that you're going to be able to breathe normally. And these guys are thinking normally when they simply don't have the physical equipment to do it. And it lasts for hours very often. So where did they come from? Where are all those memories being stored if there's no brain there? And that brings up, and I talked about him, the guy they discovered that had very little brain. He was some kind of a French civil servant, I believe, and he was older and he hurt himself. He went in for an exam. They x-rayed his head. They discovered that his brain was like 90% water, that he had like a little bit of cerebral tissue on top, and that most of his brain was just water, and that he shouldn't, in theory, be. He lived all his life. He was a normal guy. And as I always like to say, well, he was a civil servant, so that maybe that explains. I always did say that civil servants don't need brains to function, but no, he was fine, and you can Google him, I'm sure. And I probably have one or two of the little details wrong. I believe he was French. He might have been Belgian. But yeah, it's I think there's more and more. There's as much evidence for as against that the mind is non-local, and I think we're moving more and more towards non-local. And when I first heard about tubules in your brain, I'm like, yes, there we have the micro and macro worlds are coming together, because quantum physics, and I don't understand quantum physics very well. I talked to Mike, and it's sort of fuzzy sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to read about it. And I watched. I've got a very good informative video that I used to post on Minds once in a while about quantum effects. And these are demonstrable effects. These are things that have been proven in experiment after experiment. So you look at this stuff and they say, well, all these wild effects, going backwards in time and instantaneous communication of information, all this stuff, it only happens at the quantum level, the teeny tiny little micro level. We don't see that in the macro world. And yet, to me, if our macro world is built on this micro world, then there have to be some manifestation of these micro effects somehow in the macro world. Tubules in the brain, perhaps the human brain, and indeed the brain of any animal, is that interface. So maybe this is the power that we have to exist in this continual, massive, mutual, they would say in Buddhism, dependent origination, or dependent co-arising, of everything being interconnected with anything else. In other words, everything is one big synchronicity, because there is no past. 3 seconds ago did not exist. You can't point to it. And the future doesn't exist either. We can only think about it. All we have is our memories and our hopes and our thoughts and expectations and our plans. And yet, I can finish this sentence and you know exactly what I said.
Yeah.
It's one massive synchronicity, and it's made possible by tubules. That's my theory. Mike will shoot it down in 5 seconds so he hears it. He'll laugh. He'll go, oh, it's not quite that simple, Otto. I don't know.
Well, I mean, the thing that really got me spun up about it was earlier on I had started doing shows that we didn't go further with, that involved the episodes of In Search Of. I did that with Mark Watoshik, and
Leonard Nimoy, it was great.
now
Love that show.
The first episode of it that came out was called Other Voices.
Right.
And I had gone over that episode, and it was weird because like it had Cleve Baxter on it. Now, if you've never heard of Cleve Baxter, he was a former CIA polygraph expert, and what he started getting involved and getting interested in doing research with bacteria and plants. And in this episode, he wanted to show that that plants could actually communicate with one another over a long period or distances and stuff like that, and that they had somewhat of a consciousness. Well, he turned around and he did this research on the television with basically a polygraph to show how bacteria and plants respond to things, and he used yogurt actually as part of his experiment where he attached a polygraph to the freaking yogurt, okay,
Right.
with the electrodes, and he started monitoring it, and the activities of it because it had that live bacteria in it, and then he would like apply milk to it, and you could see responses from another thing of yogurt that was nearby that could tell that this yogurt over here was getting milk added
Right.
into it, so it's getting fed and it started get stimulating the other ones, and it's really weird.
So it was communicating. The
Right.
others were aware of something that was happening far away. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it is just it was something that really stirred me up on the whole thing because at first I've been interested in it, but whenever I seen that really tripped me out. And I've heard of Cleve Baxter even before then, before I watched that episode, because he had done other things too that was in his career. But since this is
Huh.
about but that was some very very interesting stuff. The thing that really got me was the old. You remember the first? What was it? The first movie for The Thing, with
With
where James Arnaz played as the monster.
uh, that wasn't the one with Patrick McGowan.
Was it the one where they were in the they
Was
were
it
up at
Antarctica? Was it Antarctica or the Arctic? I forget. It
yeah
was
it
somewhere
was
cold.
yeah, and he busts in. He's that mean plant monster.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There were
Vaguely. I haven't seen it since I was a kid.
I uh I remember there was a conversation between the doctors where they talked about vines being able to do that, where they were able to communicate with one another over long distances, and that stuck to me, and I started doing stuff into that too. So it was really weird. It just all of that came together when it comes to the just being a sentient, basically. You know what I mean? Not really sentient, but just be.
Well, aware. They're aware.
Yeah.
There's a consciousness. Um, Buddhism doesn't recognize plant consciousness as such, but some Buddhist traditions talk about deva beings,
Mm-hmm.
spiritual beings that are associated with plants. So that's a possibility of a folk memory or folk knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
kind of is preserved inside the Buddhist matrix. That's responsible for a lot of like the things you see in Tibetan Buddhism, and like Chinese and Japanese Buddhism.
Yeah.
Uh, it modifies a lot of the way people look at these things, but they still preserve the ideas they have about them.
Yeah.
Um, I know that there's like a tradition in Buddhism, for example, when you die, when this body goes, in Buddhism, you immediately take another birth. And taking a birth means if you're going to be in a ghost realm, then birth means you just appear, or a deva realm, you just appear, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in an animal realm, like a human or an animal realm, then you're going to go into a womb or an egg or whatever. Hopefully, a nice human womb. But the theory is that it happens instantaneously. That when you die, your consciousness immediately goes to a fertilized egg. Boom, and there you are. Begins the moment of conception. However, and I've been told that in Southeast Asia, there's a tradition that there's a waiting period where you take another form, and then you find a human body to hopefully a human body to take another birth in. And my thought was, well, there's nothing that says that you can't simply have a very short birth of something. So you go from being a human to like a birth as like a bird spirit or whatever. And then after like so many days or weeks or years or whatever, then jumping into a human. Um, but again, it's not orthodox, but it's just like an idea that people have based on what they've experienced with the spiritual realm in their lives.
Now the Tibetans, that don't they have a whole is that Hindu or is that Buddhism where they have when they pass on they have to go through like trials and they have
Oh,
that.
the Bardos. Actually, there's a. I was just listening to a guy explicating the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Mhm.
Yeah, they have a really complicated afterlife kind of a scenario going. It's very shamanic. They had a shamanistic religion up there when Buddhism got there, and they incorporated a lot of shamanic ideas. Um, it's. I mean, I remember reading it a long time ago as I was a kid. It basically talks about all the stages that happen to you after you die, and they have this idea that you go through these stages over such and such period of time, and in theory, if you know the book or have somebody reading it to you while you're dying, and even after you're dead for a while, can help you like go through all the phases successfully and have an auspicious rebirth. I have serious. I don't consider that to be overly Buddhist personally,
Mhm.
um, but it's certainly a shamanic practice that has gotten a Buddhist kind of take on it. You look at they basically started looking at it through a Buddhist lens. They weren't going to stop doing this stuff because apparently it worked for them. But they were also still going to be good Buddhists. So this is how they manage it. Um, and I know Tim Leary picked it up and started using it as a manual for LSD trips.
Yeah.
It's kind of wacky. Leary, he had his points, but I think in a lot of ways he really did more harm than good, personally. Um, And it did come out later on that he was a federal informant, which is interesting. That's how he escaped from prison. He advertised that he climbed over this and he went over a wire and he did this and that. And nah, they let him out. He busted the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. You ever hear of those guys?
No. I
Were amazing. They were so cool. And the cops couldn't stop them. They were this group of guys, it all came out and they were like these guys and they got started like probably late 50s, early 60s before anyone was paying attention to potheads.
mhm.
They had two things they liked to do. They liked to surf and they liked to smoke weed. And they didn't particularly look like hippies. They just looked like young people that were surfing all the time. But they loved to smoke weed. So they just created their own little network of pot. And it was like this huge pot distribution network, but it was all about the weed, man. They just loved it. It wasn't really a business, it was a subculture. They just thought weed was good. They wanted people to have it. And they could never get busted. They could never get infiltrated because you had to be a surfer and you had to be, you couldn't get close to these guys because they would know. It was very informal, but very tight. And the cops really wanted to bust them. They knew about them. People knew about the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, but they could never. And they were very smart, young, smart cookies. And I don't know all the details of their distribution network. And but they got hooked into the whole when the '60s went from being an artistic and spiritual renaissance to a political thing. When it was hijacked uh, by the left, which I think was very unfortunate. And Time Magazine would do this, and everybody started doing whatever the magazines told them, and da 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 da. So they got all kind of like, yeah, man, the counterculture, the revolution, da 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 da. So Tim Leary gets out of prison, and he's like, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love got together, and he said, "Should we help Tim Leary?" It's like, yes, man, he is the new messiah for the psychedelic age, da 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 da. So they went and they let Tim Leary into their little group and showed him everything. Well, Tim Leary reported everything to the cops, and they finally busted the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. Um, but yeah, sad story. Sad story. If only they hadn't gotten political, they'd probably still be around today.
That kind of opens you up to where you can discuss some of the stuff you were talking about too, like the difference between Western Buddhism compared to traditional Buddhism as well.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that they call Buddhism here in the West is not exactly what I'd call Buddhism. In the '60s, especially, people would just make stuff up as they went along. And when you're first looking at Buddhism, the Mahayana stuff is very flashy. You've got like Zen in Japan, which is really cool. And Zen is actually very cool. I dig Zen. But you get Zen sword, right? Zen archery.
Hmm.
These masked Zen warriors, things like that. And you get in Tibet, of course, you've got the lamas with these amazing hats, and they wear malas made from human skulls. Each bead is from a different skull, and some of them wear these. They're like vests made out of like human bones, and they use human thigh bones for trumpets as one of their musical instruments. They also have a tradition, and this is actually kind of Buddhist, where most Buddhists cremate the body. They have this thing where they just take the body and lay it out on the mountainside, cut it up a bit, and let the animals eat it, kind of like the Zoroastrians do. This is all very dramatic and cool, and then of course they've got ceremonies that the so-called tantric Buddhism, the Vajrayana, which is like these high-level supposedly things where you've got human skulls that are made into wine cups and you ceremonial drink wine. And then there's Yab Yum, where you have a consort, right? Married Buddhist monks, married lamas. And of course, in Tibet, the lamas were also the government. We always forget that the Dalai Lama is a sweet little old religious leader, and he is. But in Tibet, the Dalai Lama had police and an army. And I remember reading about the Dalai Lama before him when Alexander David Neal knew him. And he had like a bodyguard of 100 guys with rifles. And a lot of the lamas would also be the local lords, sort of like the way in Protestant Europe you would have prince bishops. Someone would be the prince of the town, but also the bishop of the town, combining these roles. And again, not overly Buddhist. Not overly Buddhist. If nothing else, Buddhist monks are forbidden from wearing hats. They're forbidden to wear hats of any sort. And man, some of those hats they have are just amazing. So, yeah, this is all very flashy and interesting. But when you actually look at the Theravada, which is the closest thing we have to what the Buddha would recognize a Theravadan monk, I think. He would say, aha, that's a monk. I don't think he would recognize a lama or a Japanese Buddhist priest, Buddhist monk. Very often they just wear like a little tiny orange sash. The Tibetans wear all kinds of amazing costumes and follow all sorts of things. The Theravada bhikkhu is still trying to live according to the rules that the Buddha laid down for the behavior of monks. They keep their precepts, they keep their vinaya, which are the monastic rules, and of course some of them are sloppier than others, but it's basically the same path, and it doesn't have anything much flashy to it. There aren't any of these wrathful Buddhist deities or cosmic space bodhisattvas that will suddenly appear before you and throw you a few Buddhist miracles. No, it's just work on yourself so that you don't suffer, and it works. The Buddha says, don't believe me, try it, and see what your results are. And if you like the results, keep going. If you don't like the results, that's okay. You don't have to. Nobody's holding a gun to your head. But if you want to end your suffering, if you want to get better control over your mind, and the better control you get over your mind, the less you suffer, because so much of our suffering, all of our suffering, really, not our pain, that we are always going to have pain, but the suffering, the thoughts we have about these things, this is under our control if we want to do the work to get it under our control. And that, to me, is what Buddhism really is all about. It's not about chanting. It's not about incense. It's not about, costumes, little prayer wheels, and like I said, the human thigh bone, trumpets and all that kind of wacky stuff. That catches your eye. There's a lot of gimme Buddhas out there. They go, gimme, gimme, gimme. I'll just say this Buddha's name and I'll get reborn in this place. It's interesting. I think there was a when the Buddha was asked about miracles. One of his guys was, yeah, you're the Buddha. Why don't you do some miracles? That would really convince these guys to follow the Dhamma. I mean, you've got all these psychic powers you developed, right? The Buddha was like, first of all, you get psychic powers from doing this stuff sometimes, but it's secondary. It's not really an important part of the path, and it's really a distraction. He says, the other thing is, if you go around doing miracles and pull this stuff off, he says, first of all, people are going to say, well, he doesn't have any good arguments if he has to do miracles. He says he wants people to come to the Dhamma because they understand it, because they understand it's the best thing that they can do for themselves if they want to end their suffering. And if they don't want to end their suffering, hey, people like to suffer, fine, suffer. That's not for them. That's that's not what we're just talking about how people can get control of their own minds. He says the other thing is if I do miracles to convince people, they're going to say, hey, how did you do that? Maybe it was a trick. There'll always be people who say, well, it was just a trick. And it's like, so he says, stay away from miracles. They're not really important. They're a distraction. And you probably heard my story about the guy who was he was an ascetic and he had a guru and it's like he's always doing all these ascetic practices and meditating and standing on his head and doing all this stuff. He was going to decide he wanted psychic powers, and you can do these yoga exercises just to specifically to develop psychic powers. So he spent like 20 years doing these austerities and things, and finally he was able to walk across the river. So he goes to his guru and says, look, my guru, after 20 years of horrible asceticisms, look, I can walk across the river. And he walks out on the river and he walks back again. And the guru says, you are a great fool. All of your friends and neighbors have been crossing the river for a half a penny on the ferry all this time. And you've been sitting in the forest hurting yourself just so you can, congratulations, you saved half a penny. You are a great fool.
Yeah. I remember you actually telling me that at one time. It was a while back, but
yeah, that's an oldie.
now you mentioned something that really stuck out to me because it's like when you were talking about having like bowls made of skulls. Now,
yeah,
that reminds me of the Bon. Now, how is the Bon related to some Buddhist beliefs? Because I know they have a part in that whole.
Well, the Bon are the Bonpo, as they're called sometimes. The Bonpo are they consider themselves to be the indigenous religion of Tibet, sort of the way the Shinto priests are the indigenous priests in Japan. So when Buddhism came in, there was friction between the two, but nowadays a lot of people follow something they call the two ways together sort of thing, so that they're Shintoists and Buddhists. And a lot of Shinto priests also act as Buddhist priests and vice versa. So they actually have a unified worship, but they still stay distinct. I know animists in Japan. They go to the Shinto temple, and it's like most people go to church around here. It's not it's not a huge part of their life, but they go in, they do the ceremonies and this and that. And some people differentiate, but even most Buddhists in Japan, I think, also take care of the Shinto deities as well. In Tibet, the Bon they considered themselves to be the indigenous religion that was there before Buddhism. The thing is, Buddhism has very much affected the Bon. So and again, I'm not an expert on them at all, but the impression I got from what little I know is that as Buddhism became more and more relevant and more dominant in Tibet, the Bon priests were like kind of marginalized. So a lot of the Bon ritual and stuff tends to ape the Buddhists, except they do it backwards. So like Buddhists tend to use a swastika that rotates to the left. They use one that rotates to the right. Buddhists wear ochre robes, in Tibet like orange and red. The Bon wear black robes. The Buddhists bear this shoulder, they bear the other shoulder, just to say, see, we're different from the Buddhists, which I think is the main thing, is to differentiate themselves and also say, oh, we've been here much longer. We're the original religion. Now, when the Germans in the 1920s and 30s, who were very interested in ancient Indo-Aryan, or as we say now, Indo-European mythology, went to Tibet, they discovered the Tibetan Buddhists that they were very interested in, but then they found the Bon, who they were looking for the oldest thing they could find. The Bon, that we've been here for thousands of years before those latecomer Buddhists. This is the way you really use a swastika. Well, I think that explains in part my own personal theory of why certain German nation decided to use a certain direction in their use of a famous symbol. But so the Bon were there first, but I really think that they're, like the Buddhists circumambulate holy places one way, the Bon do it the other way. It's very reactive. So in that sense, Buddhism has really affected them quite a bit. And of course, a lot of the Bon beliefs, the Buddhist the Tibetan Buddhist ideas that are shamanic in origin, a lot of those shamanistic ideas are very prevalent in the Bon as well. I don't really know a lot about their religion as such, but I know that it still continues in Tibetan and then in exile as well to this day.
I always did find that pretty interesting because, like, it was easy for me to comprehend with, like, the Christian beliefs, how they were always broken down into denominations and stuff, but it really just blew me out of the water when I found out that Buddhism was like that as well, you
Oh
know?
yeah,
And
oh yeah.
it just, and you were mentioning Shinto as well. When
Yeah.
you now, have you learned much about stuff like Mount Fuji and stuff of that nature? Because that's something that I was always interested. I've gotten more interested in mountain worshiping when it comes to Buddhism and shamanism. When it the whole connection there.
Well, I don't know much about it. I talked to my brother once who lives in Japan about Fujiyama, um, because the Yama suffix denotes a spirit. But he didn't know offhand anything about Fuji being regarded itself as a spirit. On the other hand, I just don't know. But his partner is a Shintoist. Maybe we could get her onto the show one of these evenings to talk about it.
That
Um,
would be awesome.
she might know more, but again, she's not a theologian or anything like that. She's just somebody that goes to a temple once in a while and does again, I don't really know, but I get the impression that she probably has about the same ideas of her same theological level as the average Christian or Buddhist for that matter. Um, but she might have some insights that would be cool. I'll talk to them about that.
Should have more than I do. I'll put it to that way.
Yes, she certainly would, and more than me as well.
You
I just don't understand it. But
I was really interested in the Shinto though because like I told you before how I noticed like the suicide forest and everybody's so mystified about that, you know. Uh, Hold up. Yeah, I lost connection, but let me get back on there. But I it's like I was telling him just now. They're really, really mystified by that. But I've found in my own, I'm really working on getting it going. Give me a second, guys. We have a tendency of losing connection on Jitsi, so that's what we're going through right now. I can pull it back up and get it back in. I'm really supposed to be talking to um all right, let me pull this up. Then once I get in there we can get it taken care of. It's supposed to be talking to Otto, you know. Hopefully he's still in there. All right.
and he's returned. I
Sorry
didn't know
about
if it was
that.
still being recorded or not while you were gone.
Now I had to talk while I was trying to get back in. But
Ah, I kept talking. I was explaining
I,
that probably there was an electronics warfare uh, issue that you had to cope with as our EW officer.
yes, that
Uh,
was exactly what it was. That was exactly what it was. Sorry that you guys had to put up with that. We took care of the bad
yeah,
guys. They're gone.
we very often. I was explaining that we have to take a very circuitous route to Shambhala International Airport because we have to keep it hidden. That's why sometimes it takes us longer or shorter to get there. But many of the territories we fly over are very curious, and I
Mhm.
said, well, Roger, I'm sure is like employing countermeasures to stop whatever drones or things that are being sent up against us to stop our flight, but nothing will stop our flight. We're still cruising on automatic pilot here.
Well, I have my theories on what caused that because
What do you, what do you
I,
think happened?
I was in the middle of discussing with you about Mount Fuji and the suicide forest, and the moment I mentioned the suicide forest, everything went quiet.
Ooh,
So,
dun dun dun.
you know,
Maybe you've alerted the Shinto spirits have noticed you now.
right.
Uh-oh.
Now, see, what I was getting ready to say though was it was like for the longest time I was hearing about this forest, okay, and I couldn't connect the dots to it until I finally did research on it, and I found out that this forest is just below Mount Fuji, okay,
Uh-huh.
and they make it out like all of these people just for some reason goes to this forest and they have no idea why they go there, and I started doing research into the Shinto and their mountain worshiping practices, and I found out that Mount Fuji is a big part of that, and also that there was another mountain that was also used as well, where they were doing the same thing with elderly people.
Huh.
Like elderly people would go and they would allow their family members to take them to this mountain and just abandon them.
Huh. Interesting.
And they, you know what I mean? And they like it just it really woke me up to a lot of that stuff. It
That
really
was that in Japan?
yeah, it was in Japan.
I'll ask my brother about that. That's
It
interesting.
it was very very interesting how that all played out. Like they would literally abandon their elderly in this on this mountain.
Right?
And then like you take a look at this forest. I don't know the proper name for it. I just call it suicide forest.
Yeah, I've heard about it, yeah.
But
And
it just it was really weird. It was kind of freaky because I know how dark a lot of their old lore is. Like they have some pretty dark like folklore. You know what I mean? Be-
yeah.
Believe it or not, it actually is pretty like that one. It's the really bad one where the the girl ghost with the black hair and you know what I mean, the one that sneaks up on you and crawls up your shirt. That's actually rooted into like old like Japanese.
I don't know, it sounds like some Saturday nights I've had.
Yeah, it's I don't even like talking about it right now. I'm getting chills up my back just trying
That's the
to.
one that comes up with the television set?
Yeah, no, that's the well. That one's bad too.
Or the ring? Or
The
was it the
the
well?
the ring, the ring. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that one's bad too.
I never saw that. I never saw that. There's so many things to see. I haven't seen
Uh,
most of them.
the one I'm talking
Um,
about, like this apartment. They had this apartment, and it was haunted by evil. It was Hungry Ghost, actually, is what I
right?
pulled from it. But it was like a Shinto version of the Hungry Ghost.
Oh, the Shinto's got some, and Taoism especially has some amazing fucking hells. Taoist hell. That you go to a Taoist temple, they've got like all these hell scenes painted on the walls. Like they'll have like dioramas with like plaster statues and stuff of like all these different tortures and stuff.
Goodness.
Yeah, yeah. You do like a Google search for like Shinto temple hell scenes or something like that. Or not Shinto, Taoist temple hell scenes in China. They love stuff like that. I think it's kind of gruesome myself.
Now Dallas, that has to do more with China, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's a Chinese thing.
With
That affected Buddhism quite a bit in China, and of course, Chinese Buddhism affected Taoism to a certain extent too. It's funny because when Buddhism first came to China, you know, Chinese people thought, "Oh, this is just Lao Tzu. This is just Taoism. They just got it wrong. You know, we just have to correct it a little bit." It took them a while to figure out, like, wait a minute, this is actually tackling different problems than we do.
yeah.
You know, I think that's a big part of it too, because religions are I mean, you've got your bicameral religions, which has to do with the stuff that we've got in history of, like, idols that would talk to people and they would obey them and this and that. And religious morality had to do with just doing what the orders were from above. What the God wants is good. What the God doesn't want is evil. There's nothing intrinsic about it. If God says kill this person, it's good. And don't kill this person because it's bad to kill that person. It has nothing to do with like there being an overriding ethical kind of an idea. But as people's minds develop, they look more for their religion. They want to answer certain questions. And that was one of the things G.K. Chesterton said about the spread of Christianity, was that the pagan religions no longer provided the kind of spiritual answers that people wanted. And that's why they turned to things like Mithraism, Christianity, Isis worship, the mystery religions. So with Buddhism is addressing the question of suffering. Your suffering. Nobody else is suffering. We're not talking about bodhisattva vows and stuff like that. That's all Mahayana gobbledygook. Your suffering and how to basically cause it to cease your suffering, get control of your own suffering, get control of your own life. And this will, of course, cause the suffering of all those around you to diminish as well. So it's really a good thing. And more importantly, it is the only effective way that you can diminish the suffering of those around you, is to diminish your own suffering. If you try to make other people not suffer first, if you try to help other people before you help yourself, you might help them a little, but it's not going to be nearly as effective as if you help yourself first, so that you are in a very good and strong position, and then naturally the people around you are feeling better. Now with Taoism in a lot of ways was a release valve for Confucianism. And Confucianism is a very ethical, a very strict, a very socially strong kind of a religion. More of a, like, in a lot of ways, we would, again, in the West, these ideas are sometimes hard for us to think of as religions. A lot of people would say Confucianism is a philosophy, but it included religious aspects, and it had the same trust and respect that a religion has, but it's very formal. It has to do with keeping social structures firm, and you do this all your life, and you really need to reconnect with the other half of yourself, the shady side of yourself, as opposed to the sunny, the Dionysian rather than the Apollonian. And Taoism was a way of connecting with your natural self. In Taoism, like, show me your original face, sort of thing. And this affected what be Chan Buddhism, which became Zen Buddhism, very, very much. With Taoism, a lot of it has to do, like with Buddhism, of being in the eternal now, being here now, and gaining the power that you have in this spot. The Taoists were not looking for nirvana, or nirvana, however you want to pronounce it. They were not looking for total release from the cycle of birth and death. I don't think that they were even into like rebirth necessarily. Not all those ancient cultures were, but it answered different questions. It had different questions that it was looking at. Put it that way, than Taoism. They were very congenial to each other in a lot of ways. But I think they have a different end in sight. But the Buddhist sage and the Taoist sage, they're like first cousins, I think.
Yeah. Now, see, like, I know that when you talk about samsara and everything, the first introduction I had to the whole thing was like more of a Hindu approach to it. Like, I know that the Hindus believe that samsara was like different, I guess you could say, different realms. You know what I mean?
All right.
And like you had the hell realms, and these were actual like different realms of existence. You know what I mean? And like you would have, I think it's six of them, I believe.
Well, I don't know a lot about Hindu mythology, but I do know that a lot of the words used in Buddhism come from like Pali or Sanskrit. They were later writers started putting it into Sanskrit, kind of like the way we put stuff into Latin to make it more official looking.
Mm-hmm.
but so like I know in Hinduism they use the word Dhamma or Dharma
Mhm.
as a teaching, a way of doing things. So there was a story in Hinduism about there was this flood threatening a village, and so all the Hindus come out and uh, they have this idea. Again, this has to do with social stability, right?
Mhm.
If you can fulfill the Dhamma of your caste, which was basically your society, your race, they consider these different races, your tribe, your group, then you will have great power. And whoever has kept the Dhamma of their caste perfectly attains to the certain level of spiritual power and can turn back the flood. So they got all the people out on the riverbank. You might have heard the story, and the highest ranking Brahmin priest comes out, and
Mhm.
he says, I am a Brahmin. Da, 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 I kept the Dhamma, da, da, and I command the water to go back. Nothing happens. Like, all right, well, he didn't keep the Dhamma very well, did he? So
Mhm.
they, the next guy up, great warrior. I'm a warrior. I've kept the Kshatriya caste, and I've got my Dhamma. Turn back the flood. Doesn't work. So they go through everybody. The greengrocer, I have gone, the Dhamma of a greengrocer, because it doesn't matter so much as what your rank is as to whether you've kept the rules right, right? So finally, they come to the last person. It's the town whore. And she goes, I have kept the Dhamma of a prostitute, da 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 da. And I use my magic power to turn. And the river turns back. She was the only one who was spiritually advanced enough to turn back the water. And she was the town prostitute. And of course, she was greatly honored and everything. But it just goes to show it doesn't matter what your position in life was, it was whether you fulfilled that Dhamma correctly. Um, Now, in Buddhism, we have the Buddha's Dhamma, the Dhamma,
Mhm.
and that has to do with the Buddhist path specifically. But it's like we would say the path or the path. The path can just be a path through the woods, or it can be the capital T, capital P path, by which the unwritten part of that is the Buddhist path. Sort of deal. So yeah, Buddhism uses Pali and Sanskrit, which were languages used at that time, or at least the Pali was, or at least something that's very close to what we have as written Pali. I'm not going to get into that because I don't understand it that well myself. A Pali is supposedly the language the Buddha spoke. A Sanskrit is what a lot of the things got written down in later because they thought it was a fancier language, and it's the Sanskrit that generally informed the Mahayana schools. Those are the manuscripts that went to China and then later Japan, and that had a lot of stuff added to it later on. The old thing. It's like, well, the Buddha actually said this 800 years ago, but you weren't ready for it. We just found it now, though. He wrote it, put it away, gave it to this guy with a snake tail. I trust him. The
Yes.
Naga.
Yeah, they I got acquainted with the word syncretism is what it is. It's like as time went by, they just kind of like synchronized and like
Yeah,
the one thing I noticed with Buddhism, especially when it comes to China and then into Japan, is they just synchronized with every single one of those pagan beliefs. There really wasn't very much conflict. They might have had their
oh, no, no.
differences.
Buddhism doesn't mind. When Buddhism comes in somewhere and you get Buddhists start showing up and people start practicing Buddhism, there's nothing in Buddhism that says you're supposed to stop going to church or stop doing your religion. That's not the point of Buddhism. So they don't tell people that there are no gods or your spirits are wrong or they're devils or this or that. But
Hmm.
you start looking at them through Buddhist lenses. And of course, these are ideas that you have. So as you become a practicing Buddhist, these other ideas are going to inform. So on that folk level, yeah, you tend to syncretize these things because, why not? No, it's like, well, I've got this knowledge. Oh, I've got this other new knowledge, and people put it together. But yeah, I don't think Buddhism is really hostile to other people's religions. Other people's religions are sometimes very hostile to Buddhism.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But yeah, the I think that's a very natural occurrence, and I've heard stories that you see that with like in my friend that lived in Burma for a long time. You see that with certain Burmese customs. I've heard the Thais are the same way. It's just a lot more noticeable the further away you get in time and space from Iron Age, northern India, where all
Hmm.
this started. And especially when you get places with different climates, different foods, different social customs. I've talked before about when, the Buddhist monks are not supposed to work with their hands. They are not supposed to do anything to grow food. They're only allowed to take what's given to them. They're only allowed to eat before noon. And, this, and very strict rules about this. They have to beg for their food, but they get to China and, 20 monks coming out of the monastery and walking through the village looking for food. They're just told, go get a job, go grow your own food. We don't have, it wasn't part of the culture. So Buddhist monks in China had to start growing their own food. And I think I've talked about this before. This is where the vegetarian diet came in,
Hmm.
started coming into vogue because the monks obviously couldn't engage in any kind of domestic animal raising, no animal husbandry. So they just grew vegetables, and their diet was vegetable. Um, there's no there's no rule that says you have to be a vegetarian in Buddhism, but that became a rule in for a lot of Buddhists in further East Asia, simply because of the conditions that fostered the growth of Buddhism in China and later Japan. And there's nothing wrong with the vegetarian diet. I don't think it's particularly healthy, and I've gotten into arguments with vegans and vegetarians about this. I've been a vegetarian myself too. I think you can make very good ethical arguments about not eating meat. All you have to do is say, "Hey, I don't want to hurt the little animal," and there you go. But from a Buddhist standpoint, if the animal's already dead, there's no bad karma involved in eating meat, and you don't want food to go to waste.
Yeah.
The Buddha was concerned again and again with food, with feeding. That's a big thing in Buddhism. We when we cling to things, we feed on them. Everything. That's the first thing in the Buddhist catechism when they teach young people is say, "What is one? One is all creatures feed. We feed emotionally. We feed physically. When we're in a relationship, most of our relationships are we feed on each other. You know, you get involved with someone's like, all right, you're going to feed on me and I'm going to feed on you. That's the secret of a successful marriage, right?
Hmm.
We feed on each other emotionally, spiritually, and we feed on things. And feeding means destruction in a certain sense. So any kind of consumption is going to involve destruction, but also rebuilding, construction. You know,
Yep.
so yeah, so karma is very direct in Buddhism when it's properly understood. It's like when people say, "Well, you shouldn't buy meat because it's contributing to this and that." It's like, no, what matters is I am not killing anything. Like, well, you're contributing to that. No, this is all in your mind. This is all imagination,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's not demonstrably positively true. The only thing demonstrably positively true is what you see in front of you right this moment. It's just heavy.
That, another thing too is like I've heard a lot of people talk about there was a lot of Greek influence that was
Oh
in
yeah.
that was involved in it, and it's like I know with the vegan thing, they were really um they were real bad when it comes to veganism. Like for me,
Well, it varied. It varied. There were philosophers and religious mystics in the West who also advocated vegetarianism. Think Apollonius of Tyana.
yeah.
I've talked about him before. Fascinating figure.
Hmm.
He's one of the guys I'd really like to meet, sit down, pick his brains. Um, there is a lot to be said for vegetarianism as a spiritual path. In the ancient world, it originally, I think, this is my own theory, it was seen as a means of purification. So before any religious ritual or religious festival, or even if you any great undertaking, one would fast and pray. And one way of fasting is to be very limited in the food you eat. So usually there would be a kind of a vegetarian diet for a while, maybe a very simple diet, just like oats or something like that, as a way of purging the body. And when we fast, it's actually it's very healthy for us physically, but B, it also does concentrate the mind very much. I haven't done any serious fasting in a while, but I used to do it once in a while as part of my spiritual path. And I think this kind of grew into always being spiritually pure. So you would always keep this sort of a diet, a simpler diet. And for them, a simpler meant fruits and vegetables or grains alone, because meat was something that everybody ate. Like you're saying, the traditional Greek was not a big on veganism. It wasn't a, at the same time, they didn't always have access to as much meat as they might. That's where sacrifice came in. I've talked about this before. When they would have a sacrifice, they also had a barbecue. This was a way, if you had a big sacrifice, the whole city ate. If
Yeah.
you sacrifice, like 5 cattle to Zeus because of something or other, somebody's birthday or a great victory, or you're trying to stave off a defeat, everybody in town lines up and they get a nice big hunk of protein that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten, because most of those guys can't afford a cow. They probably, they might get chicken or goat once in a while. So dietary protein is a very important part of people that were like, how people lived back then, man. We've got all these labor saving devices. They had to walk for miles just to get water sometimes, carry heavy loads, go to war with like 15-pound bronze shield, 8-pound bronze sword. They used to like run around in that stuff. They'd have like one of the Olympic games was like putting a guy in partial armor and like racing, like we're gonna put 80 pounds of metal on you. Run. So yeah, you want a hamburger after all that. Although interestingly, um, I remember reading about the gladiators in ancient Rome. They had a largely grain-based diet. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
When the gladiators were in training, they fed on wheat and barley. They were known as barley eaters, and they said the reason was they wanted them to have a layer of fat. They didn't want them to look like sculptures or like Mr. Universe or anything. They wanted these guys to be able to soak up an occasional thrust or cut. And the skinny guys just, there's nothing to really protect them. So they wanted big, hefty gorillas. And, high carbohydrates combined with exercise makes you a great, big, fat, strong mother, that you don't want to mess with. So,
For me personally, I don't think I could possibly ever go vegan or vegetarian because I know there's a difference, Uh,
yeah, vegetarian, you can still eat cheese and eggs, um, which is fine. And that's what I did. I never went full vegan. Even when I were vegan, I'm not sure how you pronounce it really. I keep saying vegan. That's the star of Vega. So they come from another star. Um, but yeah, I don't think you can get all the proteins you need simply from fruits and vegetables. We're not designed for it. I mean, we've been eating meat for as far back as there have been humans, and if you try to change the human diet that drastically, I mean, I know a couple of vegans, and you see them, and they don't look healthy. These are not healthy looking people,
mhm.
and
Now you've got comments on YouTube from a CDXXZ 440 4452,
oh, hello,
and he said something that goes according to the new word is foosh.
Fuchs. My
Foosh.
goodness, how do you spell that?
Foosh. I have no clue what he meant
Fuchs,
by that, but foosh.
Fuchs. I sometimes say that after a hard day of work. I go, whoosh, that's over with.
He says I've even seen it called wooba wooba.
Baluba. He could be thinking of Yab Yum, which is the
Yeah,
Tibetan consort tantric magic kind of deal.
wooba.
You know, what's interesting about this Fushi Tibetan Buddhism is, um, I remember saw something once. It was a meme about like if the world is a video game, Theravada Buddhism is just turn the game off and walk away from the console. Whereas Tibetan Buddhism is hack the game, get really good at it, and then walk away from the council and the console. And a lot of these tantric techniques, these shamanic techniques, I think they can yield a great deal of power. They can give you all sorts of mastery over all these odd little corners of your nervous system. But coming from a Theravada perspective, I would say, why bother? I mean, you're just wasting your time. It's to me, it's like more samsara. I mean, I know they have a very good Buddhist kind of a rationalization for it, You can jump through all sorts of hoops, and yeah, all right, you've got a human skull plastered with gold as a wine drinking cup. Well, okay, this is a reminder of impermanence, and it gives us, a detachment. It's sort of a in Buddhism they have a graveyard meditation or carnal house meditation where you meditate on objects of death so that you detach yourself from the fear of death and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, you can make all kinds of arguments about it, but it just seems a little too elaborate for my taste. Maybe I'm getting to be more Protestant in my old age. You could, I think, compare like Tibetan Buddhism to like Roman Catholicism, and it's or even Eastern Orthodoxy with the incense and the robes and the gold and beautiful cathedrals and gorgeous sounds of like Gregorian chants and all that kind of choirs. And then you've got like the Theravada Buddhism, which is like just Calvinism. Just all right, Buddha said it, I believe it, that settles it. We're just sticking to the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma, and we're come on, everybody, get meditate. Never mind all those space Buddhas. Get to work. Nobody's going to come here and send you to a golden land. You got to do it the hard way.
Yeah, apparently they got into a big conversation, him and Dragus production about professional energy harvesters. So there's no telling because that's Mark Watashik who he's talking about when Mark gets off onto some crazy conversations, man. But yeah,
Really, that's more samsara. You get into these occult things and
yeah.
start playing around with energy vampirism and stuff like that. And really, it's no different from physical pursuits. You go around looking for like occult energy. You go around looking for physical energy.
Hmm.
You go around trying to pick up a girl. You go around trying to pick up a succubus. I mean, you're just on a higher level, but you're still chasing your own tail. There's in occultism, there are people that use as their symbolic matrix. They use the Holy Kabbalah and they use the Tree of Life that I'm sure all our listeners are familiar with. And you've got like the descending lightning bolt and the ascending serpent, and it travels through all of the different sephira, you know. Um, and the occultist is the guy that he goes through all of them in order and attains all these different things and these experiences and stuff like that. The mystic just goes from the bottom straight up the top, middle pillar, boom. You know, why be a show off? Why spend all this time? I mean, if you enjoy it, great. But I'm at a stage in my life and my experience where I just want to go right to the top. I don't want to waste my time with these side issues. So I just went straight mysticism, you know, just
Hmm.
cutting past all of the powers and all these little psychic things, and that's all great. And yeah, I've had all kinds of interesting experiences, but at the end of the day, it's no different from physical power. I mean, there's someone who eschews, well, I'm not gonna like put myself out to try to be a success in this lower world. I'm going to be a great mage, and I'm going to be a success in a higher world. Well, maybe you are, but it's just another world that you're a success in.
Yeah.
The successful mage is no different than the successful businessman. He's going to be working just as hard and be just as harried. Whereas, I want to get out of the whole show entirely. It's nirvana or a bust kind of deal ultimately.
Yeah.
I don't want to play games anymore. I just want to turn the machine off. It's not easy, but at least it's a goal. So,
That kind of gets
if you
me.
want to do the other stuff, that's cool too. I'm not criticizing it. I did it myself for years, but ultimately, it's just I find it. I think I find it a dead end for me personally, simply because my goals have changed. My goals have changed over the years.
I mean, I haven't gotten too deep into it and everything, but there's one thing I've actually been wanting to ask somebody who's been involved in Buddhism about this, and I know you're into it really pretty deep, but like I don't know much about it at all, but like what's your thoughts when it comes to this non-duality kind of belief?
Uh
I don't know if you're aware of that or not. There's actually a following that where they just don't believe it. It's like non-duality. You know what I mean?
Monism. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, in Taoism, they say, what was it? The one produced two, the two produced many.
Hmm.
Um, in Taoism, there's the idea that any kind of duality is movement away from the Tao, from the original state of oneness. Um, but the thing is, without differentiation, right, we can't really sense anything or do anything. Um, we have to differentiate, even though arguably there's no real separation between us. There's the air, and we say, well, we have a skin. Well, the skin is pierced with pores. There's all kinds of dense bits of it go up into the air, bits of it go down on a microscopic level. The air interpermeates us. We are just as dependent upon, for example, the existence of the sun as of our hearts. And we're inexorably, intertwined with all of the effects that solar radiation has on the planet, the air. It's all really one thing. But that state, while a wonderful state to rest in, is not a. It's in many ways the opposite. In some ways, of samsara. It's not nirvana, but it's a state which is very restful and wonderful, and it is the ground of our being if we can touch it. But we can't function in it. If it informs us, we still have to descend into the day-to-day world and chase our tails around in samsara because, as I always point out, we have to get the sidewalk shoveled and we have to pay the bills and we have to go to work and do all these things because people depend upon us and we depend upon ourselves to do this.
Yeah.
So we have to leave the monism and descend into the dualistic world in order to function. But I think that you can argue that above the dualistic world there is the monistic world. But realizing that, I think, is a wonderful experience, an enjoyable mystical experience. But again, it has to be held in, unless you're spending your life on a mountaintop somewhere. It has to be something um, that we can have, but not always let it control us. We can't be acting from it directly all the time, but it should inform us otherwise.
It was actually a pretty good way of answering that because I mean I'm being honest. I have very little information when it comes to non-dualism. I've been doing a lot of research into the whole duality thing and then triality and then like
Uh,
I got
I think
sucker
I
punched
think
with it.
I think ultimately it can push you into what they call pantheism,
Hmm.
and the objection to that is that everything is God, right?
Hmm.
The whole universe is just one, including God, and everything just is everything. And from a certain perspective, or if you look at it a certain way, you can just say, well, it doesn't matter what I do because everything is everything anyway.
Hmm.
And so it's, in a sense, saying everything is like saying everything is up, everything is green. It's really kind of a meaningless statement on a certain level. It doesn't, getting back to it, doesn't really help us in our day to day lives. Even doesn't really necessarily help us in our day to day philosophy. Um, I think it's more of a mystical insight than a philosophical point.
Yeah.
Because once we start into philosophy, it means we're talking. The minute you talk, you're in the world of duality. You have silences and sounds. You're separating things, and there's significance to us in the sounds and in the silences.
Hmm.
So already we're breaking stuff up. 0 1 0 1 1 0 1 1 0, right?
Yeah. The CDXXYZ 440 no 4452 said ma ma Magement and then quantum and then Dayum. Dayum. I don't know what any of
Diome.
Dayum.
I think that's Southern.
Like
Diome.
Dayum. Quant
Diome.
Dayum. Yeah.
Quantum diome.
I think he got into a really really good conversation with Dragus and whenever that happens, it kind of sets people off into a CDXX. There you go. That's how he says, but it sets them off into a different world. They start talking about coffee and stuff like that.
Wow.
So,
I remember my Roman numerals. What's CDXX? C is 100, right?
yeah, I
And
believe so.
D is 50 and XX is 20. So 170?
Most likely. Yeah, CDX. I've got to go back over my Roman numerals. It's been forever
Yeah.
since.
When I was a kid, I used to love Roman numerals. I was very interested in Roman stuff. I think we all go through a phase. I was actually watching a series of very interesting videos about it was about the Cimbrian War, but they were talking about the Roman uh, stuff leading up to the first Roman Civil War, the first major civil war with Sulla and Marius, and it was very interesting because Marius had was the conqueror of the Cimbri, and he basically genocided them. And this guy, I remember, came across something very interesting. They think this guy, the one theory they had about him was that he had PTSD because, like, later in life, he would have nightmares and wake up screaming orders from the battlefield and stuff. And he would say he could hear the screams, but he wiped out the Cimbri. He wiped out the entire people, men, women, and children. The story he sent back to Rome was that all the women and children committed suicide, or we could capture them. That sounds a little suspicious to me. They had like, the entire population, like 9 of them survived or something. So
Uh-huh.
this guy was like this guy was a genocidal maniac, but he was a conqueror and he saved Rome and da 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 da. So he decided to stay in politics, and he was pushing for basically open borders for Rome. He was going to grant Roman citizenship and voting rights to all the non-Roman Italian tribes that had helped out. The Cisalpine Gaul, the Senones, the guys down in Calabria, all those guys. None of them used to be, only Roman citizens were allowed to be in the army. Only Roman citizens could vote. And they were saying, well, you just want to introduce all these foreigners and give them the vote so that you'll be in power forever and you can push through any of the programs you want. And he had on the side the guys, the tribunes of the people who wanted to push through these social programs where they would redistribute the wealth and take land away from people, settle. He had all these soldiers he was going to settle away. They didn't have welfare then, but they would say, well, you get a farm because you fought. He had tens and tens and tens of thousands of soldiers that needed farms. So he just like confiscated the land from people, and he could pass all this if he had the votes. The people that were opposing him, Sulla, was like, no, we're going to make Rome great again. We're not going to allow this. And that evolved into like an amazing civil war. It was really amazing to hear what the issues were at the time. I'm just so glad we never have anything like that happen today.
I couldn't believe the Roman numerals. I should have caught it. CDXX stands for 420.
Ah, very good. Oh, D is 500. Okay.
I like he finally pointed it out to me in chat, so I responded to him. I was like, "Wow, I cannot believe I missed that." I
Okay. See, I got my Roman numerals wrong too. So
I was like, "My goodness."
I
Like,
was I was only 10 off. So that was a 500, not a 50. Okay,
mhm.
that makes sense. Although 170 is good too because you've got the magic 17 in there.
Well, I mean, I we were talking about Buddhism in the West and stuff, and I mean,
Mhm.
it just like we can't leave 420 out. You know what I mean? That kind of goes along with it. And what's his name? That other guy. My goodness, I cannot believe I had a brain fart about it. He's the guy that was always into consciousness. He did the documentaries. You know who I'm talking about, don't you?
Probably, but there's so many guys that are into consciousness. Alan Watts. He did some TV shows.
Well, not Alan Watts is a big one, but this guy was all into the whole psychedelic drugs and stuff.
Well, let me see. Tim Leary, Richard Alpert, or Ram Dass, as he was called.
He's
Allen Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac. Um,
starts with like a Q or something like that. He was always
John Lilly.
no, he was always high when he was in his documentaries too. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe I completely forgot.
Tommy Chong. Tommy Chong. Yeah, he was always done in his documentary.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, man.
No, I was talking to somebody the other day and I was like, man, I've never seen him in any documentary where he was actually sober when he's talking. You know, what I mean, if you're going to be like talking about consciousness and stuff, you should at least be sober when you do it.
Oh, you want to see Tommy Chong in something fun? You really got to watch that movie Yellowbeard. You really got to watch that. The Cheech and Chong are in it, and Tommy Chong plays this Spanish Inquisitor, right? Who sets up his own little kingdom somewhere in like a little island off South America or something. And so it's like a neo Aztec hippie kind of. It's really hard to describe, but he is hilarious. He's like a horrible tyrant. Uh, I won't say anything more about the film, but I think you would really like it.
I, I actually Tommy Chong he did something here recently that I actually did give him a lot of credit for because I forgot what it was though, but I remember he was it him or was it Cheech? It was one of the two, but it had to do with the marijuana stuff. Like he,
Chong's Bongs. I
huh?
know he had that company for a while, Chong's Bongs.
Yeah, I think that was it. He said he had to give it up because he actually had to stop smoking pot, and he said he was getting too old for it. I think is what it was.
I know. Didn't he got in trouble with the government for a while over that?
Hmm. I think it
Didn't they put
was
him in jail?
Chong. I think that was
Yeah, I
who.
think they put Tommy Chong in jail
Yeah.
over it. Yeah,
And
and now it's legal everywhere.
yeah.
He's like a hero.
Woody Harrelson also had to give up the pot. He said he was getting too old for it. They did an interview with him. And he's like, "Man, I promote marijuana and I agree with it, but man, after a certain age, you just have to stop." I was like, "Yeah, whatever, man." I was like, he smoked himself crazy, is what he did.
Well, it's like anything else, your body changes, and you just like to do different things.
Hmm.
I used to hate milk. Never drank milk when I was a kid. Even when I had cereal, I would just eat the cereal. I would leave the milk in the bottom of the bowl. And then as I'm older now, I love milk. I drink it all the time. On the other hand, I used to love shrimp and seafood when I was a kid, and now I don't really care for it. All I can think of is like I ate so much of it that I just kind of got sick of it. So your body does change, and it'll say, I don't want to do this anymore. So not surprising, especially if he did a lot of it. Maybe just like, oh, I took enough. Um, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I don't do nearly as much as I used to, but then there's other things that I do. So it's kind of interesting to watch how we change.
Now with me, the reason why I had to quit smoking pot was because I ran out of money.
It can be expensive,
You know,
especially the bad old days when you couldn't grow your own.
well, I mean, it's like now, like you can go to a freaking uh
Oh yeah,
a
go to the
shop,
store.
yeah,
Yeah,
and get it, and like I mean, I had to do it back in the hard days, back when they had seeds and stems. You know what I mean? It was like,
I
man,
remember. Yeah, geez, half the weight would be seeds, and now it's like, at least around here. Well, I told you when they legalized pot here, the governor was just trying to distract people from like his own political scandals. So he gave the pot legalization people everything they wanted. They just put on the table. so that now you can carry up to 2 ounces in your pocket. I forgot how many, was it 50 pounds at your, it was like some 10 pounds at your house. If you're a grower, they might have changed that one.
Mhm.
You can grow like, so many plants. I mean, it's up to 6 plants, but I know guys that grow plants that are like, 12 foot tall. You can get plenty off of just one. So you've got six. And it's completely legal to just give it as a gift. There's no, in fact, when they first started passing the law, we had no dispensaries here. So they'd set up these flea markets. Some people set up storefronts, and you go in there and buy a sticker, right? Sticker was for like $25, and you would get a complimentary eighth of an ounce of weed with the sticker. And I knew a guy doing it. He said, I had 2 state policemen in here. I asked them, can I do this? And they said, you are within the law. And there was no political will to enforce it. So now we've got the licensed dispensaries and stuff, but people have been growing so much. I was just over at a friend of mine's house, and I was there with a couple of friends. He gave us each like an ounce of weed. He said, I have plenty more. Let me know when you run out. He had like buckets of it that he got from these couple, 3, 4 plants that he grew. He just hands it out to his friends. And a lot of people do that now. It's weird because in the old days, it was like, you had to know people, and it was a little circle. And it was like you were like the French resistance in the war, in the movies kind of deal. You had to be careful what you said and this and that. And you got to know people and depend on them and stuff. And then it kind of became a big kind of a business. It got kind of like Hunter Thompson said, there's no more drug culture, it's just big dirty business.
Mhm.
And now that people are allowed to grow and aren't being prosecuted for it, I think those little circles are coming back of like, here, just have some weed, man. Just have some, you know, which is really nice. And even if you don't know someone to do that, just put your seeds in the ground. And nobody bothers with it anymore around here that I've seen. We haven't had any trouble with it. So
I had to do a Google search, and it's Terrence McKenna is who I was thinking of.
McKenna, yeah, he was an interesting guy. He
I,
had some really weird ideas, and some of them were not correct, I don't think. But
I, I,
he
I,
thought the world was going to come to an end in 2012, and that didn't happen.
yeah.
But
Well, I mean, I never saw the man sober.
no,
E-
probably not.
Ever. I mean, I used to watch documentaries where he'd get on there and start talking, and I had never once seen Terrence McKenna sober. And everybody's like, "How do you know he was high?" I'm like, dude, I was a drug addict until I was 30 years old. Trust me, I know when somebody's high. You know what I mean?
Well,
I,
that was his brand, dude. He's not going to come out straight. That's not what his public wanted.
I mean, if you're gonna go on a professional documentary with other philosophers and psychologists, then you might want to be sober when you did it. And
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. But he had his approach.
so,
He was a big psychedelic guy, and that even when you're not taking it, I've known guys that it can affect your brain,
hmm
and not necessarily positively. I
hmm
think we've all known a few guys that just took a little too much acid, and I used to know this guy who, I don't know whether it was the acid or if he had other issues. I'm sure he had other issues. He's a weird guy, but he would just eat acid in ways that didn't make any sense. I mean, I don't know how much acid you've done, but it's like if you do acid, you've got to wait at least a week before you're at your original, you get
reset.
a tolerance to it. Yeah. If you take a hit, if you want to get off again, you got to double that dose. If you
Yep.
want to get off, and then double that, double that. So, yeah, we would trip for days. We'd take a hit, then 2, 4, 6, 8. Pretty soon you're eating 10 or 20 hits at a time, and you realize, even at the prices I'm getting, this is getting expensive. I think this is it for the weekend, kind of deal.
Yep.
So he would like just take, like, he might have taken like 5 hits of acid the day before. The next day, someone offers him 1 hit, he'll take it.
Yep.
You're not going to feel that. He didn't care. He would just take it. You offered him any amount at any time, he would just eat the whole thing. You give him a sheet, he'd eat the sheet. He didn't care. He was just, and he was very confused in his speech, but I think I might have told you about this guy. One, you'd like talk to him. I remember I'd like run into him and we'd like have a conversation, and then I wouldn't see him for like 3 months, and I'd see him, and then he would just pick up the conversation exactly where we left it 3 months before,
Yep.
as if I just walked out the door. He had just like right back into it, stuff like that. Interesting guy. Interesting guy. He spent a fortune on. He was fascinated with hair, and he was going bald, and he was lamenting that he had got his hair cut, but he was going to get implants. He had money. It was very expensive back then. Whenever he came in and he had all these implants in his forehead. I ever see guys that get that, the hair implants,
Yeah. I,
a whole
I
bunch of little circles with a little hair growing inside of each one or something.
mhm.
And he said, "Oh, it's going to grow out. I'm going to have hair again." I'm like, "Good." And I ran into him months later because he would like fade in and out of town, and he still had the hair implants, but he got his hair cut again. And he was lamenting that he got his hair cut. And I'm like, "Dude, you got no staying power. You're refraining from action. It should be the easiest thing in the world to do, you
Yep.
know." But it's tough.
I used to know somebody who um, did so much acid it literally fried his brain. Like by the time I think I was about 19 or 20, and he was a few years older than I was. Bad he had a bad trip, and just his brain was completely fried. We'd go over and visit him and hang out with him and everything, but he could barely focus. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that was you would think that that would be something that would wake a kid up, say, "Look, I'm not gonna do that," but it didn't do it. I kept on doing drugs and stuff after that. I even had a friend of mine, Reed, who did acid with us, and he ended up going home, and because his dad caught him and was driving him home, he gets out of the car, he grabs the rear view mirror and starts crying into it, saying that the devil is going to freaking kill him. Okay, he was literally having a vision and screaming at this rear view mirror and on his dad's car,
wow,
and
yeah,
and he never hung out with us anymore. He told us about it, and that was about it. And didn't stop me. You know, I finally all the way through it. I mean, I just kept on going, kept on going. I didn't sober up till I was 30, and when I finally sobered up, I was like, my God, look at all these years that are just completely gone because they were just like couldn't remember half of them. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
People,
Well,
it's just amazing.
no, it's that's the other thing about these drugs is they're very powerful and I think can be very useful. But when you're not prepared for them and you don't have the right dosage set and setting, that's something Tim Leary told us, and that is true.
Hmm.
And you're not mentally prepared for it. Sort of on that spectrum that includes like occult practices, because a lot of occultism, magic, whatever you want to call it, involves wine and strange drugs, which is a quote from the Book of the Law. To worship me, take wine and strange drugs, where if I shall tell my prophet, they shall not harm thee at all. I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory. To worship me, take wine and strange drugs. That's from the Book of the Law. So there's been a long connection with strange drugs and occultism. But Israel Regarde pointed out that a lot of people get involved in magic, occultism, these mystical paths, because they're trying to cope with their own mental illness. And this is not a good idea because you are opening up, this is that arrow flying straight to hell again. You're opening up aspects of the human mind that we are not equipped to cope with here in the West. We don't have the personal mythology for it anymore. We don't have the language, the internal language for it anymore. What we do have left are just storybook versions. He thought the devil was talking to him. He
Hmm.
had no idea of the inner theology of demonology and theurgy of religious theory. Because then if he thought that the devil was talking to him, well, then he would also know that Christ could defend him from the devil. I mean, if you're taking one part of the mythology, but you don't take the other part of the mythology, you don't have the answer to it.
Right.
You know, why would you make a deal with the devil? He lost his war. You know, tell the truth and shame the devil. There was a great scene in the Arabian Nights. The first story in the Arabian Nights is a story of the fisherman who finds a brass bottle, and when he opens it, a genie comes out.
Mm-hmm.
You know that one?
Yep.
And in the story, the genie was imprisoned there for centuries. In the first century, he said, anyone that lets me out, I will give him the wealth of the earth. Next century, anyone that lets me out, I will give him all power over the earth. Finally, he's like, anyone that lets me out, I will reward him with, wishes and this and that. And he got pissed. He's like, I'm sick and tired. Whoever lets me out, I'm going to kill him. And then the fisherman finds him and lets him out. He says, aha, I'm going to kill you. He's like, what? He's like, yeah, I gotta. So the fisherman says, well, it's just a jinn. I'm one of God's creatures. I'm the son of Adam. I have dominion over jinn. I cannot be able to outsmart a jinn, And in the story, he tricks him back into the bottle. I don't believe you could fit in there. Of course I could. Well, prove it. Oh yeah, watch this. Goes back in the bottle. The fisherman seals it up and says, well, I'm throwing you back in here, and I'm going to set up a house right here on the shore, and I'm going to tell people, do not fish here, because you will find a brass bottle with an ungrateful genie in it. You'll be down there forever. And the genie's like, no, 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 please, please, let me out, let me out. And so that he had this experience. What's interesting to me about that story too, if you read that story, the whole story. Now, when he finally lets the genie out, and the genie says, all right, I'll let you out. If you let me out, I will reward you. He says, okay. So he undoes the thing, and the genie comes out, and the genie has sworn that he will help him, that it'd be, give him a great gift. So genie's back on the beach, and he's looking at this genie. It's like, uh-oh, I hope he keeps his word. The genie just kicks the bottle, into the water, and he laughs. Ha, 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 ha. He says, but I keep my word. He says, well, listen, I've been in that bottle for centuries, so I don't really know what's going on very well. But if you go to this place and you get these fish and bring them to the Sultan, and then see what happens. And then he disappears. So he goes, he gets the fish. And there's a long, drawn-out story, but at the end of the story, the fisherman is rewarded, and he lives happily ever after in a nice palace and stuff, and he's well taken care of. Now, in that whole story, everything that happened there could have just happened inside the fisherman's head. He had some kind of a weird experience on the beach, but he wasn't marked by it. There was no physical evidence. He is almost like a UFO contact. He came back with this information that seemed to come from nowhere, came from a bottle that he found in the bottom of the sea that said, go do this act. Just enter yourself into this line of karma. Enter yourself into this line of actions and see what happens. And so he suddenly had this information that enabled him to become a wealthy man. It had nothing to do with him being given a magic object. He wasn't handed a treasure chest. There was no real quote unquote magic to it as far as the whole outside world sees. But he had an experience that could have very well happened in what they sometimes call the imaginal world, the liminal world, because our world is, of course, made up of electrochemical thingamabobs going on in the brain, supposedly, because of what hits our senses. So things don't have to hit our physical senses to make an impression on the brain. We have other ways of sensing that we're not always aware of. So he could very well have had an experience just as real as everything else we're imagining. It's simply that it would not be shared with everyone else. When you and I look at a tree, we're sharing the experience of seeing the tree. But if you look in the tree and you see a Sasquatch hiding in there and I don't, you have had that experience. Something has caused your brain to register this. It might not have necessarily come from your eyes, but it's going to register as sight. So I think that's what happened with the genie, with that fisherman in that very first story. It's a fascinating little thought, actually. I'm glad that you brought that up because it gave me a chance to talk about the fisherman.
That's a pretty good story, too. That really is.
But yeah, so that guy with the devil, all he knew was the devil. He didn't know ways to, if you're going to be functioning in a world where there is a devil, then you have to function in a world also where the devil's shortcomings are also apparent. But when you're not prepared to open up these aspects of your mind, it's frightening and overwhelming, especially when there's things, and I'm talking from my own experience, where we spend a lot of our lives hiding from things or ignoring things that when you take these psychedelics, suddenly you're brought face to face with. And if you're given that experience without the preparation for it,
Mm-hmm.
you are very likely to be going into disaster. So Israel Regardie said, don't go into the occultism, don't go into the drugs, don't go into the mysticism and the meditation and stuff until he suggested going through therapy, basically getting yourself in a good, stable mental condition
Yep.
before you take a drug, which really is an amazingly powerful thing that can open up the mind to all sorts of possibilities. I mean, they were using it psychiatrically with a great deal of success in helping people to overcome neuroses. Remember Cary Grant,
Yeah.
the movie actor?
Yep.
He loved LSD. He was on LSD therapy under a psychiatrist back when it was legal in the 1950s. And he talked about it publicly a couple of times. You have to dig for it, but he found it to be one of the most successful treatments. He got past a lot of mental issues, and he finally had the confidence to become a father for the first time. He'd been really scared of that after his LSD therapy began. There was all sorts of wonderful possibilities with using these psychedelics, and then the government just clamped everything down. They were scared shitless of
Yep.
what was going on with it. And I think that was a big mistake. And Tim Leary was, again, responsible, I think, for a great deal because scientists were like, hey, this stuff's really... All of a sudden, Tim Leary comes out and is like, we're gonna come for your kids and we're gonna get them to drop acid and we're gonna destroy your whole fucking culture. Woo! Well, people don't like that,
Yeah.
you know.
It's kind of scary.
It sounds fun when you're 17, maybe, you know, but yeah, when you get a little older and realize somebody's got to fucking plow the roads.
These people are
Who's going to put in the grocery stores? You know?
these people were building bunkers in their backyard for like to prevent the
Right.
nuclear bomb from landing, and you got this hippie freaking talking about stealing your children and stuff. So
Yeah, well, you know, the other thing is, I mean, you've always got a bohemian fringe in any society.
hmm
I am part of that bohemian fringe in our society. And bohemian fringe, properly understood, are people that, because of whatever terrible things that have happened to them, whatever reason that they have mental illness or they're the walking wounded, they can't fit very well into society. And yet they are creative, intelligent people who can create and who can live fulfilling lives, but they have to live it outside of mainstream society because they simply don't fit in. And this has always, there's always been beats, there's always been weirdos, there's always been people that are not the squares from Delaware. But suddenly it became popular to be a rebel. Suddenly it became popular to be a bohemian. And suddenly everyone had to be a bohemian. And it's not for everyone. And the whole thing got watered down horribly. And, you know, you need the squares, man. You need the buses to be running. You need the trains to run on time. It's really cool to be a bohemian that like looks down on the workaday world. And they used to say, well, what if everybody did that? Well, no, not everybody's going to do that. Most people couldn't stand it. It's not really good for most people. It's the result of a life situation that is actually very sad when you think about it. But suddenly, everybody had to be a bohemian, and it's like suddenly everybody's doing it, and like suddenly everyone is like, let's smash society. Oh, let's let all this stuff slide. You can't do a whole society of slackers. Slackers can only make up a small percentage, and as one of the true noble small percentage of slackful bohemians, I'm telling the rest of the world, get the fuck back to work, man. We really need a stable, strong Western society for us to criticize. It's very difficult to criticize Western society when it's doing its best to go backwards to like make itself woke and destroy itself. It's like no. Come on, guys. You know, how can I be any sort of a weirdo rebel if the whole world around me is getting weird? I mean, everybody's got a beard now, man. When I wore a beard, when I was a young man, you were penalized quite heavily, socially, financially, for having a beard. You couldn't get hired for certain jobs. I think I told you I was once walking down the street. Some mother ran out and grabbed her kid out of the sidewalk and saw this big bearded guy. Well, you were considered to be either a violent biker or a druggie of some sort.
Yep.
And it was really tough to wear the beard. You that now. I mean, and I've seen some magnificent beards, magnificent beards. And I was talking to some guy. Oh, do you remember when it was tough to grow a beard? He had a gray beard like me. No, I only grew this 10 years ago when it became fashionable. Like, all right, hiker, slacker. I was like, geez, maybe I should shave, but I think, nah, I spent too much time with this thing. I don't think I could get used to being clean shaven again.
I couldn't do it. Well, I've actually pondered on doing it, but I haven't brought myself to do it. You know what I mean? It's like it just put so much time and effort into growing it.
Oh, and everybody's got one now, Raj. You know, you stand out more now when you don't have a beard. It's funny, and you know, I kind of saw this coming. I think I've mentioned before there was a gentleman named Reginald Reynolds who wrote a book on beards, and he pointed out that every time you have a bearded age, it's succeeded by a shaven age, and every time you have a shaven age, it's succeeded by a bearded age. So while the Victorians were all those magnificent beards, you know, young guys like Sherlock Holmes shaved. You know, Sherlock Holmes, his character was very bohemian and weird. And one of the things he did was he was clean shaven. And even young Watson only had a mustache. This was the up and coming generation. They didn't wear the beavers that their dads did. You
Yeah.
know, oh, that's so 1870. We're in the 1890s now. You know, we're wear mustaches. Some of us even shave completely. That was the daring thing, you know. And by the late Edwardian era, by the time you got into that, clean shaven was all the young people, and the beard signified the old guys, the older generation. So, but then for a while now, most of the guys you see shaven are older guys, and not all of them, but yeah, and now a young man, you're more likely to see. Well, I just look at the band I'm in. We got like 6 guys in there, and only 2 of them shave out of 6. You
Well,
know,
that's where it
and,
should be, though.
and yeah, and one guy does have a beard, but he shaves his head. You know, so there's
Mm.
now I guess it's like dealer's choice as far as hairstyles go. You know,
I
doesn't
think
really mean anything anymore.
I think the beard has to do mostly with the age, though. Like most of the older people that I know, they're more into the beard thing. You know what I mean?
You think?
These days, yeah. Like
Huh.
I like even the ones that don't have beards are really curious about it. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
I've gotten people who are clean shaven. They're just curious. They're like, how long did it make or did it take you to grow that? You know?
I heard that.
And
I
they,
heard that. Well, nowadays, of course, if you feel like experimenting, it's not so difficult to do. But yeah, there was a time when it was, again, like I was saying, beard. It was tougher to wear a beard. But I would have guys come up to me in the bar and say, "How long did it take to grow that? I tried to grow one. It didn't grow. I had 2 weeks." And I said, "Try not shaving for 15 years. I bet you'll have something there." I haven't
exactly.
shaved in, oh my God, I'm trying to think of how far back. Um, Probably the last time I did any shaving at all, I was probably like 17 or 18 years old. Um, I messed around with my beard a bit after that. At one point, I actually shaved my mustache off, so I had like the the Farmer Joyles kind of just the whiskers,
Hmm.
like the Amish wear. Um, that was an interesting experiment. I let it grow back, but because my girlfriend at the time was like, "Oh, your mustache needs trimming. I don't like kissing you because you." So I'm like, "All right." I shaved off my whole mustache. She said, "I didn't mean the whole mustache." She grew it back. It's like I just wanted to trim it a little.
I'm
Oh,
telling you.
my one buddy, his wife almost killed him because he shaved. He always wore a beard, and I've always known him with a beard. But it was like one Halloween, and he was doing a costume, so he shaved for it. And when I saw him, I went over to his house for a party, and I went over there. And he was like, I'm like, it took me a couple of seconds. It's like, oh, okay, you took your beard off. But his wife was like, she told him never do that again. Grow that back at once and never do that. She'd never seen him unshaven.
That'd make me self-conscious, man. I was like, hold on a minute.
Oh,
Sweet.
the
What do you,
suddenly shave.
yo, what are you saying? Like all of a sudden you see my bare face. What am I that ugly? It's like put it back on, put it back on. Yeah. That's just
Well,
me though.
I remember when I got to boot camp and they shave everybody's heads, and I had long hair then and a beard, but I trimmed my beard down a bit, and but I had like shoulder length hair. Kind of wish I'd kept it now because my hair would have been longer than it is. But so they're barbering hundreds and hundreds of people. So you got like all these kids standing around, all us guys, and everyone's putting their hands up to their heads just slowly. I was doing it too because every so often you'd be like, "What's wrong?" It's like you just feel so weird with no hair. It's just like, oh, ah. I showed up with like shoulder length hair, and I got there like the night before they processed us, and one of the guys that were there looked at me and says, "Look at that hair! Don't let the CC see that. Get him to the barbers right away." They were like saving me from the company commander. So he was like, "Oh, he's gonna have fun with you."
Having a field day.
Oh, they gave me the tough stuff right away. Like, all right, clean the toilets. All right, I just said, all right, no problem. It's
Tell you.
always good to pitch in, when you're going somewhere. Remember a job I had once? I walked in there and they were like, yeah, da, 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 and they were moving a piano. So I just took off my shirt and I helped out. I got the job. I didn't work there, nothing, but there was guys there and they were having trouble. So, hey, I'll give you guys a hand. And I just helped them to move a piano. Had a sore back, but I had a job. So,
That was actually like I can remember whenever I was younger where you could actually get jobs doing that, and that's kind of
yeah.
what we really need to go back to. Like I remember my dad used to always tell me about it was a little bit after my time as a kid, but he used to always tell me about like if you want a job with a mechanic, you go there and you tell them that you'd be willing to do freaking work on the side, and they'll tell you to clean stuff up, and if they like you, they'll just hire you on.
Yeah.
And it was hard for me to believe that that stuff was true until finally later on I started hearing other older guys talk about that stuff. Like, yeah, this is the way it was when we were kids, and like, but people don't believe that. Like at one time, that was how simple things were. It was like if you just pitch in,
Yeah.
you know.
And you hear words, somebody needs help with something. I mean, I know a guy, something like that happened with him. He got it helped out like with his in a shop, a garage, working on cars, and he picked up a little more how to do it, and then he started doing it on the side, and
Hmm.
eventually he just started repairing cars
Yeah.
for money, and then he repaired a guy's car apparently, and the guy didn't like the job he did, and he said, "Screw you." So the guy called up the state and said, "There's a guy here who's repairing cars unlicensed." By this time, he was renting a garage to do this
Oh
thing.
my goodness.
So he told me the state showed up and said, "Hey, you don't have the state thing to collect taxes on this registered motor vehicle shop." So he said, so what they did was he said they basically um, they arrested him. Well, they didn't arrest, but they basically, wrote him a ticket, said, all right, you owe this huge fine for having operated without collecting sales tax for this long. Now we're going to give you a license, and now you have to become a mechanic and pay that off. So he basically, the state forced him to get a license. He had to buy a license, pay what he owed, but he was able to do it through his business kind of deal. And
Uh-huh.
he's had his own business probably for 30 or 40 years now, and he's still doing it.
Yep.
And he does all my work on my car for me.
I,
But yeah, he started off underground, and but you could do stuff like, I mean, all the jobs I have, like all my jobs are basically stuff I've heard about. I go in, I talk to people, and they say, okay, or there are people I kind of know that I helped out with, help out here. This one store I worked at, I knew the people, and the one guy got sick. Can he come in and cover some hours? Next thing you know, I was working there every week and making really good money because they just needed someone, and they knew me, and I had the time, And the next thing you know, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm actually making good money at this. And I worked there for like some years. Um, for these art galleries I used to work at, guys knew me there and said, hey, can you watch the gallery? Right, come in to see. You need someone to take care of the gallery for a while? Sure. I do a good job. Next thing you know, I'm working there every day. So you can still find stuff like that.
Pretty
No,
cool.
yeah, they headhunted me doing the entertainment at the park there. And so we say, hey, we want you. I love when people come to you and ask you. It's like that's really neat.
Yeah.
Roger, we want you on our show.
Yeah.
You're going to be V's co-host apparently.
Well, V drives me nuts.
That'll be fun.
Okay, so V drives me nuts. He says that he wants me to do this and he wants me to do that, but then he runs 5 different directions all at once. So I kind of hold my breath until it's actually done. You know what I mean? When it comes to
Right.
V. V
Right.
V.
Don't get worked up about it till you see what it's actually going to be.
Yeah. So
I know that feeling.
V's a wild man.
Well,
So
he's got a lot of energy. He's got a lot of mental energy, a lot of intellectual energy.
yeah.
I know the feeling. In some ways, he kind of reminds me of a younger me. In some ways,
Uh,
in some ways, but it's tough when you've got all these thoughts and
mhm.
you've got all these directions you see you can go in, and it's like in the cartoon where the cartoon character runs in 5 directions at once, like you're saying, like "Ding!" you know,
That's the best way to do it. It's like having a ray gun. Pew, pew,
Whoosh.
pew.
It's like whoosh. Maybe that's what whoosh is. Uh, well,
So
Roger, I think it's getting a little late. I hate to say it.
sounds good to me. I mean I'm probably gonna end up falling asleep right after we're done here because like I
Yeah,
said
you
this
got to stay awake till we land, though, because we need your electronics warfare skill if nothing else. I do see the lights of Shambhala International Airport and the secret portal in the side of the undisclosed mountains in the Himalayan range, or possibly the Himalayan range. I'm sure we'll get some. If we know how to pronounce Himalaya, please mention it in the comments. Is it Himalaya or Himalayan? I could never get that right. But be that as it may, I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn off the smoking lamp and light the seatbelt lights. Please return your trays up to the seat in front of you and bring your seat to an upright position. The stewards will be coming along collecting your hash pipes, and we will be making our approach to Shambhala very shortly. I'd like to thank our co-pilot and electronics warfare officer, Roger Hansen, for making sure we were able to get through all of the chaff and drones that were thrown up at us. But Roger, you took appropriate countermeasures, and we got through once again. Thanks so much for your help.
no problem.
All right. So once more, we will mention our socials. Of course, I am at navakavada.org. That's NAVAKAVADA.org. It's spelled just like it sounds. And of course, on minds.com is AutoX or Auto Excelsior. Roger, would you like to share your socials with our audience?
Yeah, you can find me at Roger_Hansen@minds.com. You can also find me on Elements as well as on Teams at Rogers Hangout. That's Element Matrix. Other than that, it's just regular platforms like YouTube and Rumble and DLive.
Right. Any place that you see this.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's cool. And of course, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to add them in the whatever platform you're watching us on or listening to us on. Comment, make suggestions, answer questions. If you've got the answer to the Himalayan question, that can be the subject of our next show. A final solution to the Himalayan question, or is it Himalayan? Maybe we'll discover. So, yep. A little turbulence. All right, we're coming into the airport, so I'm going to say good night to everyone, and hope to see you on our next flight.
Okay, we got it.
Groovy.
That was good. Now I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. I got the recording done. The stream's still going, so
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that that was empty. Everything seems to be good. That Jitsi and stuff, it was only a little bit of it that got taken off of there. I think it was only like maybe 10 or 15 minutes, but
That'll be fine. That'll be fine.
it should be a good edit and everything. So
Excellent.
I when you saying it's time to end, it was perfect timing because like I'm getting this cold weather is driving me nuts.
Yeah, I tell you, every year we look at each other and say, "Why are we living here? This is too cold for humans." But
Yeah,
how it is to move, it's so tough. My mom's in the nursing home up here now, and I got,
yeah,
the band and work and fixing the house. I mean, I got to fix the house anyway. I got a lot of infrastructure issues, but to fix it up to sell and then find, it's such a pain in the butt. And we'd have to buy another place. I can't afford to rent. What they get for rent these days is bloody
no,
insane.
no, I would never do that. Uh,
It's just, it's crazy. But
everybody keeps talking about that stuff like you're supposed to just like give up your house because you've gotten older and stuff, and I'm like, no, dude, what are you talking about? Because that means you go back to a life of paying rent. You know what I mean? You don't want to do that stuff. That's what you did when you was in your 20s and stuff.
yeah, that's a good point. And in the old days, houses tended to stay in families.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have generations there. You know, uh, it would be like the Smith house.
Mm-hmm.
And a Smith has lived there for like 100 years or something like that. You didn't just say, "Hey, I'm just going to go off and get a little apartment somewhere." That sounds more fun. No, it's not. It's just,
No, it's not. It's horrible. It's like,
and I tell you, I get online and I see these kids on 4chan, and when you get and a lot of them are so young, and you start seeing what they want. They want a house.
yeah,
They don't want to live in an apartment. These kids want that, and I don't blame them. You know,
yep,
like you're saying that apartment stuff's like that's for when we're younger.
yep,
Dude, I knew this country was going in the wrong direction when I saw middle-aged people working at McDonald's.
yeah,
Because when I grew up, that was a job for kids. When you were older, you'd had a better job, and then you retired, and old people didn't work. And
yep.
I suddenly started seeing all these old people in the workforce, and I still find it very odd. And here I am, an old person in the workforce. I
Yep.
mean, I know a few people that managed to retire. They're mostly guys that have like state jobs and stuff like that. But even my one buddy that worked for the state, he retired a couple of years ago, but he got a job just to keep up with his bills and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got like other issues too. So
So
yeah,
I better in the stream and
yeah. Are we still on the stream?
yeah, I apologize
I got
about
I got the, I got the landing gear down anyway. We're gonna